If everybody's ready, I would like to get the meeting started. At this time, I call the meeting to order. Good evening, Exeter. Good evening to my colleagues on the board, respective town staff, the participants who are with us tonight, and good evening to those of you who are watching from home. As chair of the Exeter Select Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Public notice of this meeting was posted on the town website and on the bulletin board of the town offices at 10 Front Street. As provided by the public notice, the public may access the meeting online and via phone, and remind everybody that the usual rules of conduct and decorum apply. All votes taken tonight will be done so via roll call vote. I'll start the meeting by introducing the board via roll call. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting and who that person is, which is required under the right to know law. Good evening, Selectman Darrell Brown.
I am here alone, and good evening.
Thank you. Selectwoman Lovey Roundtree Olaf.
I'm here in room alone.
Thank you. Our clerk, Selectwoman Julie Gilman.
And good evening. I am alone, although there may be some background noise.
The Vice Chair, Selectwoman Molly Cowan.
Hey, everybody. I'm here and I'm alone.
And I'm Nico Peppercostendis. I am here alone, albeit in a different room than you're accustomed to seeing. So we also have our town manager, Mr. Russ Dean.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and the rest of the board. I am in the office and I am alone.
Thank you. And our recording secretary, Joanna Bartella.
Hi, I'm here and I'm alone in the room.
Good evening. Okay, we have a full meeting. So before we get started on public comment, I've prepared a few words that I would like to share with everybody this evening that I wrote over the weekend while reviewing the packet and the board materials. During reflection, considerable reflection, dawned on me that while we have so many reasons why we are approaching this new year with confidence and optimism, it's clear that not all of our challenges remain in the past. Last week, we were shaken by the disturbing scenes from the United States Capitol. What occurred in Washington, D.C. crossed the line. In the United States, we embrace the diversity of backgrounds and perspectives that they hold, as well as the freedoms to express them peacefully. We condemn the violence that took place and recognize that one of the greatest aspects of American democracy is the peaceful transition of power, one that is now underway and must be completely supported. Violence is never the answer. Let us not forget that similar dissent occurred at the state level last year in Michigan, and also at a local level in 2017 in Charlottesville, Virginia. This behavior cannot be legitimized, nor can it become the norm. Here in Exeter, as individuals and as a community, we have risen to overcome so much before, and there is no doubt we will do so again as we continue to support each other, work together, and learn from one another. The amazing citizens of Exeter are what makes our community so tremendous and strong. American democracy, here in Exeter and around the country, will remain resilient. Thank you. I'm sure there are other members of the board that may want to comment about what happened last week, and without putting anyone on the spot, if anybody has anything they'd like to say, please, at this time, step forward. Okay.
I would just echo what all of the words that the chair said, and also to once again thank our election staff. Elections are one of our most precious and most sacred undertakings that we do as a local government. And I'm proud always of the work that we do here in Exeter. The elections are safe and secure. And the amount of participation, while challenging for all of those who were there all day, is something to be proud of. And so I just want to restate that as well.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no other comments from the board, it's now time for public comment from our public. This is an opportunity for the public to weigh in and address the board. We do ask, though, that if your public comment is pertaining to anything on the agenda, you do wait until that agenda item comes up. So I will open it up for public comment now. Because we're on Zoom, I will pause for a moment to see if any hands go up. Okay, seeing none, I will close the public comment at this time. We do not have any proclamations or recognitions this evening. So the next item of business would be the approval of the regular meeting minutes of the Exeter Select Board meeting of January 4th, 2021. Are there any revisions or amendments to the minutes? Okay. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the Exeter Select Board regular meeting minutes of January 4th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comment? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
The clerk says aye. Mr. Chair.
Aye, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We don't have any appointments tonight, so we can jump right into our discussion action items, the first of which is a continuation of our conversation regarding the 2021 deliberative session and voting. I guess, Mr. Dean, we could start with you. Do you have anything new to add since we last met?
So I do, Mr. Chairman. I'll just start by saying that based upon the way that the current law is written, the Select Board has the week of January 30th, which is a Saturday, through February 6th to hold the deliberative session on one of those days. And I would also report that the SB2 bill that we talked about last time, that is actually in the packet tonight, my understanding is that it passed the Senate unanimously, and however, the House of Representatives did not suspend their rules, so therefore the bill couldn't be taken up in as expeditious a manner. So my understanding is, and Selectwoman Gilman could certainly weigh in on this too, is that the bill has to wait until elections law has a hearing on it later in the month. So that really puts the bill sort of up against, potentially up against our normal deliberative session date, which would be January 30th. So at this time, that's really all I have to report on it. And but we do have Attorney Mitchell is on the call tonight, and also our moderator, Paul Scafidi, and Vicki Navoychek, one of our checklist supervisors, as well as Kate Miller, who's the school moderator. And I will add, as we get into this discussion, one of the key components of any delay, of course, has to do with the school district and voting and so forth. So it does get a little bit complicated. And with that, I think I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, to start the conversation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dean. Selectwoman Gilman, do you have anything you'd like to add from your role as a rep?
There has been nothing official announced yet about when the House will reconvene for session. They're still working out the logistics of how we will meet, and the proposal so far is to have some people in Retz Hall and some people in other meeting rooms in another building. And there are unanswered questions about how we will have any interaction from room to room, electronically or virtually. And the dates that have been thrown out are January 27th, but I'm not confident that the answers to our questions will be met. And the next meeting scheduled may be February 3rd. And that is still kind of rumor. It hasn't been officially announced by the speaker.
Thank you. Attorney Mitchell, do you have anything new to add since we last met last Monday?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Then Attorney Miller, good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. Perhaps you could report to us where the school's coming from.
Hi, thank you. I've been on a fast learning curve to understand these issues. One of the challenges is that the 6 towns that comprise our cooperative school district for the middle school and the high school coordinate their balloting, not the deliberative sessions, but the times when folks go and cast their ballots, so that the cooperative school district's balloting happens in conjunction with the town's balloting. And so as we're looking at questions of timing and scheduling, we need to keep our eye on that balloting date, which I believe is scheduled, if it were not postponed, for March 9 this year. Is that correct? There's also a tight window between deliberative session and the balloting session for an SB2 district or town, which I think is 28 days. Or for towns that have a traditional town meeting, the regular session of the town meeting, you usually have to also move the balloting session, especially in the SB2 towns. So we're somewhat limited there by those constraints. I've been polling the other 5 towns, and I understand that all of them have already either decided for no delay or postponement, or are tending to go in that direction. And the rule with the cooperative district is essentially the town moderators decide whether or not the towns will do a postponement for their town elections and balloting. And if a majority of the 6 towns vote to do so, then there can be a postponement. But if not, then there can't. So this creates a constraint on the town of Exeter. To date, it looks like the other 5 towns are not planning on postponing deliberative session or balloting session. So that limits the options, as I understand it, for the town of Exeter to do a postponement.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moderator, Mr. Scafidi?
Been in discussion with Kate. I've also been in discussion with Mr. Dean about this. It's one of those things where Kate's correct. Try to get all 5 or 6 town moderators to get on the same page about when we can do it is going to be, as she aptly put it, like getting a bunch of cats together. It's just not going to happen very well and very easily. Mr. Dean and I discussed last Friday when we spoke of moving the town deliberative session to February 6th rather than January 30th. It still falls within the window. It gives the school the option, the SAU, the option to take January 30th. That way they were not overlapping or fighting each other and making it more difficult to put it all together. Today I spoke with Mr. Lister, the school building superintendent. He's leaving both of those dates open for us. So there's no problem that way. From 9 o'clock on both days, so the school can have the 30th and us the 6th, or vice versa if something happens. The other thing today, we discussed the seating capacity of the auditorium where we normally meet. I thought it was around 600. He informed me today it's 1,000. People can sit in the auditorium, which I believe would be more than adequate to do social distancing. As we've talked in the past, most deliberative sessions only have around 200 people, 220 at the most over the past few years. I don't know if this one's going to be any different that's going to bring out, I don't know anything on the warrant yet that's going to bring people out, but even if it does, we could sit 300 in there and still social distance quite easily. So I'm leaning right now. I know the calls can be on the moderators, but I want to hear what the board has to say as well, Mr. Dean, of leaving the voting on March 9th, deliberative session on February 6th. And that way there, we're not trying to fight with the other towns to make this all work together, because it has to work together. It just doesn't seem, Exeter's not going to be the one that's going to determine how they vote. So let's try to make this, if everybody's for it, make the traditional day of March 9th the way we should be going.
Paul, I had a question.
Sure.
The 300 distance, is it 300 individuals, or are you grouping those people at all?
Daryl, that's a tough one. We're, husbands and wives of family members, they're allowed to sit together. I'm going to go, if we do go this way, I'm going to get there and I spoke with Mr. Lister again about looking at the auditorium and how's the best way to do it. Haven't taken the time to really work it out yet. He says he's done some research on the best way to make the auditorium as safe as possible. The biggest issue we're going to have is mask, no mask as well. I shouldn't say it's the biggest issue, but that's going to be an issue. Do we allow people without a mask into the auditorium? My inclination is no. Do we have, and Walter may be able to help us out with this one, can we have a separate room set up for people without masks so they can be in a room and still participate? Those are the things we got to work out between now and February 6th.
Mr. Moderator, this is Vicki. With regards to mask or no mask, the state mandate just got extended. So how does that, I would think that everybody has to be masked.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with that. But on the other hand, the state mandate when we were voting back in September is if someone gave you a hard time about masks, you had the option to let them vote. I don't want to be out there saying we're trying to, stop someone from exercising their right to vote. I believe the mask is important for all of us. So if we have to put those people in a separate room, and the select board, as of right now, the select board's no mask rule doesn't extend all the way out to the high school. So whether the state rule follows through, maybe Walter can tell whether that's, part of it. I don't know.
Well, this is a very different thing than just voting, walking into a place, casting a ballot and leaving. This is sitting in an auditorium for long hours and period of time, exposing everybody. I have grave concern. Half of my family now has COVID, and they got that at a doctor's office. So, they're the ones practicing severe, high-end, making sure that they're masked and hand washing. I get it. Well, I'll be there. I just have grave concern. And then, none of us have been meeting personally, publicly. None of our school boards have been meeting in public. None of you all have been meeting in public. So we're going to all of a sudden switch to have a town meeting for this one election. I get it. We have to. It doesn't make any sense. So we're going to have a town meeting and then we're going to revert back to all Zoom. What message are we sending?
Yeah. Vic, I don't disagree with anything you said, but the alternatives are so far-flung that they're having, some towns, as Kate was talking about earlier, are having outdoor, sit in your car, turn into a low-volume FM radio station and listen to it. Okay, great. How do you get them to vote? Beep their horn twice for yes, once for no? It doesn't make, there isn't an easy solution to this. And if we have to have deliberative session, I think the only way we can do it is live and keep everybody happy. If I'm wrong and you guys have a better solution, I'm definitely for it. I don't have any problem.
To that, Mr. Moderator, we have several members of the board, I think, that want to weigh in. Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf, you had your hand up first.
Go ahead.
I know this may sound somewhat ridiculous, but didn't Parks and Rec this summer have a drive-through movie option where they were at the high school and they had the big screen and were able to live feed things for folks who were parked in their cars. I think Kate has her hand up.
Don't know.
Go ahead, Kate. If you ever, I'm just.
Sure. I spent some time scouring for successful examples, and the Winnisquam School District did a drive-in movie experience. And I chatted with some folks who'd been involved, including the woman who was the supervisor of the checklist for the town of Tilton. So the logistics are challenging. The weather is a total wild card. In Tilton, took over the Tangier's shopping outlet parking lot. They had a stage, they had, huge speakers so that people could hear what the select board and people at the microphones were saying. But it was May and it snowed.
Of course it
did. And the winds were 30 miles an hour. They had tents for the supervisors of the checklist, which all blew down. They were there.
I'm thinking slightly different. So I'm thinking more along the lines of if the select board were, let's say, in the auditorium on the stage as normal, and that was broadcasted via radio and the screen, something along those lines where people could then drive through to vote live while still listening and having the option to view on a big screen. It's less of having speakers sound out to people having their windows rolled down, but I think we're technologically advanced enough to perhaps have something where on people's AM or FM stations, they can still hear what's being discussed. I think we're not completely out of options yet. I do agree that having a mass of people inside without masks can be complicated, even if they're in separate rooms, because people are still coming in through the same entrance, or even if not the same entrance, we're still in the same building. And it taints the water, so to speak, of those who want to be isolated and those who don't. So I'm just hoping that, if we can push the date to further in February, that it'll give us some time to maybe come up with some alternative options. Perhaps Andy Swanson has some ideas in IT that they've been researching. I think I don't know. It just came to me that might be something for us to consider. So I'll throw it out there for others to discuss as well.
But Mr. Chairman, if I may,
please.
One thing that we have to keep in mind is we're talking about how we're going to conduct the deliberative session. And if we were talking about voting, yes, drive through, you're handed one ballot. Maybe it works. We'll get at some other point, we can talk about authority to do that, but maybe it works. But with a deliberative session, you could be voting, or the body could be voting on a dozen different motions in that multi-hour segment. How do you do that with drive-through?
Mr. Chair, can I speak to that, having lived through a couple of these different situations?
Please, Selectwoman Gilman.
I appreciate Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf's putting the idea out there to keep people protected while they're listening to what's going on. But as our attorney, Mr. Mitchell, has said, there's no interactivity unless we set up a voter system like they did for the State House with remote voting system, which was not always accurate. And so people have to check their votes to make sure that they were recorded correctly, and some of them weren't. And so that's the problem I have with the whole thing, is that the interactivity between voters is difficult to do remotely. I don't like the idea that the select board has the final say on amendments to warrant articles. I'm uncomfortable with that. I will go with it if that's what we have to do because of the area schools. but I'm really uncomfortable with that. I think that we have had at the state, a large space that held 400 people or a little less in a large place with socially distanced chairs. Everybody was masked. Those who weren't masked were segregated off into a different area, but still in the same space. And that worked. I don't know, because then we've had several representatives be tested positive and died. It's really, because we have to consider the other towns, that's where our details should be going. So I'm thinking live. We have to distance. We can mark off the chairs like they do in the press conference room at the White House. People that come in and from their own household pod can sit together and just move down where the markers are for the most available chair. And we definitely have to set a section out for people who don't want to wear masks. And what that number is, I don't know, but we have to have somebody watch it. The supervisors of the checklist are in another special thing where they actually have to interact with every person that comes in. That I haven't figured out a path. It's unfortunate that a lot of the half virtual, half the hybrid version of like the select board being in person and the public being virtual, I think interferes with the interactivity. Like one person, one voter can't get up and make an amendment and a second voter come up and change that amendment. It's going to be left up to the board to decide from the electronic messages that we get between the two virtual sessions that we have. And so as much as I really am reluctant to gather a lot of people, and I've heard from members of the community and medical professionals who just see us having this impossible decision to make, but are reluctant to meet in person. And I felt like this last Wednesday. I did not go to UNH to sit in a car for 7 hours because it was too long a distance for me to drive. I have some restrictions, and no one else was willing to have somebody outside their pod, sitting in their car, masked and sanitized for that amount of time. So I could not vote on anything that happened that day. And that's where my reaction is coming from. That's where I feel like I don't want to, and I'm going to use the word disenfranchised because that's what it felt like. But to have people not be able to participate is, it just hurts. It really hurts. And it's like I told somebody, it's a toss of the coin. One way is good for participation, but it will be a lower number of participants, I am sure. The other way is putting a lot of burden on the board. And if we're willing to take that on, I'll go that way, but just consider that. And then as Attorney Miller brought up, we have other towns that we have to deal with and respect their deadlines and fit them in with ours. So, I'd love to hear more opinions, but I'll tell you my experience either way has been not good.
Thank you. Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf and then Selectwoman Cowan, please.
Following what you just said, Julie, truth be told, the deliberative sessions that I've attended prior to joining the select board, which are all of them, have primarily had a population that was slightly older than I am. And I just really concern myself with the people who are really not going to want to come out here and vote in person because they're the most susceptible to COVID, masked or unmasked. So what we're doing is we're outwardly saying that we are not considering you as voters of this town, and we're going to go ahead and make a decision without your health in concern. So I'm putting that on the table. I don't know if anyone has spoken to the folks at Riverwoods. I don't know what conversations have taken place prior to this, but, they certainly make up a larger percentage of the people who come out to deliberative sessions than younger families and couples and the such. So something to consider.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, and that's why I'm saying that the live session would be depressed. There would be less participants because of
almost non-existent.
No, there's a lot more younger people. I'll speak over my experience since 2007. Younger families are coming out. We still have a stronger presence of older folks, but they're not alone in the presentation. And I agree with you. I don't want to shut them out just because we have to use technology. And but for their safety, we have to consider using technology. So, I don't know where I am yet. I have to hear more.
Selectwoman Cowan.
I guess I need to hear more about why we don't have the authority to move the election. And I understand that the House, that the legislature has not taken up the bill to allow us to move the election. But what is preventing us from just saying it is too dangerous? We are going to disenfranchise too many people, regardless of how we decide to hold this deliberative session. If we go online, we disenfranchise people with no computers. If we say everybody has to be in cars and you don't have a car, then we disenfranchise. There's no good way to do this. So I'm just wondering, again, can we move this to a date where most of the people who are susceptible to COVID have access to the vaccine? I am absolutely not in favor of letting anybody into that room who is not masked. They can have their own room, which is fine, but I am not ever going to be okay, even with widespread COVID vaccinations, to have that possible. So I guess we need to hear from Walter and Kate probably on this, but I don't see any good solutions here.
Mr. Chair, while you're contemplating that, just on the mask issue, and I just wanted to make sure the board understood that James Murray was here and on the call, and he's actually been talking to the state about mask issues and so forth.
James, if you could weigh in, that would be great. We also have a member of the public who has a hand up, and I'd like some public comment on this since we're whatever decision we make, we're making for the public. So James, if you could just weigh in first, and then I'd like to open up to the public.
So I did reach out to the AG's office on this on Friday afternoon. The individual I spoke with wasn't really sure. The question went up the chain and I haven't heard back yet. So at this time, I don't have anything to add, unfortunately.
James, doesn't the state mask mandate, isn't that applicable to all indoor gatherings?
Yes, it is. Yes.
But Mr. Chair, it is not enforceable.
I see. Mm-hmm.
Can we pass something that makes it enforceable? I mean, I don't understand why we wouldn't be able to do that. Anyway, I'd like to hear from Walter and Kate.
Chair? Or did you want to take the public first?
Well, if you, I'd like to hear Attorney Mitchell and Attorney Miller if you want to weigh in on that, and then we can go to the public. Okay, and Kate, feel free to chime in. But my understanding, and going back to Molly's question, this isn't a question that of the authority, whether or not there's authority to extend out our voting. If we were talking about the town of Exeter alone, then there's no question that you have the authority to, or the moderator has the authority to extend the voting to a later day. The question is, how do you do that when, at least by tradition and perhaps legally, because I don't know a thing about cooperative school districts, but the voting has always taken place on the same day.
So how do you accomplish that without the cooperation of the 6 towns in the cooperative school district?
And I'm happy to weigh in on that. Would you like me to sort of jump into that, Nico? So the statute is 669-1. I've been hitting the books. And this is about the balloting piece. So as I said at the beginning, we have to kind of work backwards from balloting to the scheduling of the deliberative session, because there's a set interval of 28 days between those two events. So when you've got a ballot that's being used in multiple districts, such as a cooperative school district, the moderators of the towns, so that's not me, that's the town moderators for the 6 towns, shall communicate and reach a consensus on the postponement, if there's going to be a postponement for the balloting. In such instances, one of the moderators is selected to notify the state. And if it's not possible to get a consensus on this, then it is the majority that controls. So if 4 towns out of the 6 in the co-op district say we're going forward with an in-person deliberative session or a alternative virtual one that doesn't change the deadlines for a deliberative session or balloting, then the other 2 districts are stuck, basically, and cannot exercise their underlying right, which Walter is correct about, for the moderator to be able to postpone based on safety. So it's essentially that due to the fact that we are part of a cooperative district, and we are unable to act alone in that situation.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the board for either Attorney Mitchell or Attorney Miller relative to that before I turn it over to the public?
I do have one. Is there, and I know we went through this a little bit, do you have a sense of what the other 6 or the other 5 towns are thinking? That's either to Paul or to Kate.
Yes. So far as I can tell, all of them either have decided or are tending in that direction to not postpone.
So based on what you just read, the RSA, that means we are forced to have that meeting in that window?
We can't postpone our deliberative session far enough out that it would require postponing the balloting session, because we're locked together on the balloting session.
Okay, thank you.
Nico, can I bounce something off Kate?
Yep, please.
And that is, Kate, you've explained what it is in the law that ties the towns together as a practical matter. The towns that are part of a cooperative school district.
Mm-hmm.
As a technical legal matter, I don't know anything that ties the voting for the cooperative school district with the voting, in this case, for the town of Exeter. Mm-hmm. Because you do or have more involvement with or schoolwork than I do, maybe there is something that you're aware of. Although as a practical matter, I can't imagine the supervisors of the checklist want to go through this twice. Have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so essentially when you've got a ballot item that is going to be acted on in multiple different towns, whether it's a water district or a school district, the postponement of the election applies to all the towns voting on the issue. And I will say, when we had a snow day, I think it was in 2017, and postponed the balloting session before we had recent legislation on moderators' ability or lack of ability to do the balloting session postponements, I believe 1, possibly 2 of our towns did balloting on a different day, and we just held the results. We didn't announce the co-op results until all of those had come in. We survived that one. that worked.
And I'm not pretending that's a good result here, and I'm not advocating for that. But I think it's technically possible if you get the cooperation of the supervisors of the checklist. But I'm not. It would be up to the town's moderator to decide whether that's a good idea.
Right.
Is the idea that they're going to be lowering the numbers per?
So basically it says here, if a consensus can't be reached, the election shall be postponed only if a majority of the moderators vote to postpone. So that's where we get stuck.
Selectwoman Gilman?
Yes, I just wanted to say to the point of all the towns agreeing or being in conjunction with balloting on the same day. And then we have the example which went through the courts and the House to clarify the moderator's authority. Those towns did vote on separate days, and we did hold the results, so one town didn't influence another. But the number of students coming to these schools or going to these schools are from a majority from Exeter. The populations that are voting from the other towns are not as large. And so my question is, would lobbying the other towns from the select board and residents, voters in Exeter have any influence on what happens in Newfields or East Kingston?
So far, what I've done, shall I respond?
Please.
Okay. So far, what I've been doing is basically gathering information. Where are you in your decision process? Are you considering postponing? And I haven't been pushing, in part because I don't know exactly what the co-op board wants to do. And I know that this select board hasn't made a decision yet either. I haven't tried to influence. One can always try that. I'm not sure how much effect it would have, but it's certainly possible to check with other counterparts. Something that had looked appealing to me initially was the possibility of doing successive 72-hour postponements of the deliberative session based on safety until we get to the point that the legislature acts on the legislation and allows either the school board or the Board of Selectmen to postpone to a later date, such as May, for both balloting and deliberative session. That might have been an option if we could get everybody on the same date, but that one is going to be, I think, almost impossible to do, just because the successive postponements are a nightmare logistically to try to execute.
Paul, have you spoken with any of your colleagues, other town moderators within those towns?
No, I haven't. Kate and I have been discussing this for a few days now. I wanted to see what tonight was going to bring before I started reaching out to other moderators. Only, one of the big problems we have as Exeter is our voting population is, in most instances, 4 or 5 times everybody else's by far. So if they're having a deliberative session in East Kingston, they may have 220 people show up, where we have 2,500 vote. And, it's tough. I'd love to postpone until May, but until the state says we can, what are we doing? We got to make something happen. And like Kate says, if the consensus is to go ahead and do it because of the co-op, we go ahead and do March 9th. And even though the law does state after the decision to postpone shall be made on the day immediately prior to the election and any time before 6 o'clock. So on March 8th, I can make the postponement call at 5:30 at night. And that falls within reasonable delay. I can go to the 72 hours. So like Walter was saying, I just don't know which way to go that's going to make everything easier until the state determines what we're going to be doing. I can reach out to the other moderators, and my plan is to see if we can get some cooperation. But I want to know what you, the board, how you feel about making this all work in a reasonable manner.
Fair enough. Okay, I'd like to open up to the public. We have at least one person who's been patiently waiting. If we could grant access to Reverend Heidi.
Friends, good evening. Thank you for taking my comment tonight. First, I want to say thank you.
Reverend, could you just, for the record, state your name and address, please?
Yes, absolutely. Heidi Carrington, 10 Chestnut Street. I want to say thank you tonight. I realize you are navigating a situation in so many ways that is very much not of your own making, and appreciate the care and thoughtfulness that you are putting into this. I want to raise a couple concerns, one of which I have not heard in this conversation, but I think is a worthy point to consider. And that's the question of ventilation in the high school auditorium. We know now much more than we did months ago what a key role HVAC and ventilation play in both the containment and the spread of COVID-19. And I'm really concerned about a scenario in which hundreds of people are sitting inside a room that is potentially poorly ventilated, even with masks on. I also just want to name a concern about the new variant of COVID-19 that is increasingly demonstrated to be more contagious. And this feels like exactly the kind of scenario, even with good precautions, that something like that could spread. So I just really want to lift up Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf's point about pursuing some options that, while they may not be ideal, allow folks to be outside. And as a voter, I hear Selectwoman Gilman, one of the things I most love about deliberative session is the back and forth between voters and our elected officials. But no one's life is worth that for me. I'd much rather have an option to be present and be involved that puts safety first and doesn't disenfranchise some of our most vulnerable populations. Thanks, friends. I don't envy you. Good luck.
Thank you, Reverend. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak on this subject? The other part of that with the ventilation was also, Mr. Dean, this is something we'd have to work out with the school, is the microphones, right? Because part of deliberative session is people getting up to speak. How do you sanitize the microphones? Can you sanitize the microphones, or has that been looked at?
Right. And I think, again, looking at the issue tonight, I mean, obviously we would have to do that, and we would be creating a mechanism to do that within the high school auditorium. I think I've reported to the board before, but they've offered us the space. So certainly, and Paul has, as he mentioned, has spoken with Rusty Lister about various issues with the site, and just hearing what we hear tonight, obviously we'd follow up more on those so we would be, totally clear on what we were looking at. So beyond that, I'm not sure what else I could add to it at this point, Mr. Chairman, unless there are more questions.
So can we cleanse the mics? Is there a way to do that?
We would prepare to do that. We actually, Mr. Glowacki, I think, is available tonight. He might be able to speak to that. If he comes in,
how many do we have on?
Specifics, but we would endeavor to do that. I know that.
We, if I can, we've talked about this in getting the microphones, having somebody literally at each one of the microphones with wipes and sprays to do it, bringing in the plexiglass that we used during the voting session to be in front of the supervisors of the checklist. Same thing, we can set them up in front of the microphones, looking to have a minimum of 6 microphones, 1 for myself, 2 for the select board, and 3 out in the population if there's a need be, so we can, while someone's talking in one, someone's cleaning the other. So I've been debating on how to do this. I'm not saying it's going to be 100% effective, but we got to do what we have to do if we're going to be doing this. So yeah, there's Mr. Galecki might be able to give you a better idea of how to handle that part of it. But the plexiglass shields that we got from the state, even though the schools are using them right now, we can take them for that Saturday and put them in front of the supervisors and any other place we deem necessary.
Thank you, Paul. We have Vicky, Selectwoman Gilman, and then Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf in that order, please. Vicky, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
The other thing we have to think about is how people actually enter and seat and then exit the building. It's usually a flood of people trying to get through a very small space. So there has to be some sort of level of dismissal of, okay, the first 3 rows can leave and then the next 3 rows, not everybody can get up and go. That's going to be a cluster of trying to get people out. The other thing is sure, you can put a plexiglass shield, in front of me, but I got the sides, people coming at me at the sides. So the plexi shield is like, whatever. So I have concerns about that. And, we're going to need extra volunteers to help manage just the flow of people in and out of that room. And then, of course, with the microphones, I wouldn't want to use a microphone after someone else, even if it's sanitized. There's woven little metal pieces, and God only knows what's living in there. I just think there's a lot of hazards that, and to Heidi's point, there's another variant of COVID, and it's just in New York now, so it's coming up the coast.
Thank you. Selectwoman Gilman.
I'm just thinking about, because Heidi brought up the variant, which had not been playing in my head. If we want to go to the outdoor method of the drive-in kind of thing, as we did at the state, I have no idea what that costs. The town already has the authority through Parks and Rec to have a screen and an FM station for everyone to listen to. And then it brings up the question of how the public interacts with each other, which at the meeting at UNH were people in golf carts running up and down the aisles. Now, I don't know that we're going to have 350 people at this thing, but golf carts with microphones on 6-foot long booms that they would stick into a car and then go off and disinfect it in some way. I'm finding that more attractive, even though it's going to be the end of January, and if there's weather, there's a problem. So I'll put it out there that it's the cost too, and whether we can put that down for CARES or HEROES Act money. And again, as I said, the voting was sometimes questionable. We don't often have to have a vote unless somebody amends a warrant article. So it may not be an issue, but I don't know. the outdoors one, you can convince me if we can work out the details in a satisfactory manner.
Mr. Chair, I know IT will mention it, but there's also an option for microphone sleeves. That is something that could be looked at.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf?
I'm just going to put it out there that I personally don't feel comfortable with the number of mics that you guys have stated that we would have on hand. I'm not sharing a mic with anybody else on the panel. Love y'all, but not that much. So we would have to have a plan in place where we really start to put things together. And I just don't feel like we have the time to do that. You know, I feel like we don't have enough equipment that would be necessary for even asking people indoors or outdoors to be able to voice their opinions. We haven't looked into, you know, what it would look like if we were having it outside. Where would we be? What would the sound be like? I just feel like there's a lot of stuff that we don't have to even have this conversation right now. There's a lot more research that needs to be done. We seem to be waiting on a lot of other towns, a lot of other people to make their decisions before we make our decisions. And, you know, we have work to do. We have actual tactical work to do. And I feel like we're literally wasting a lot of time just talking about hopes and dreams. And I would love us to have some concrete, like, here's what we have. Here's plan A, here's plan B, here's plan C. We have everything necessary for plan A. This is what we need for plan B. Plan C is completely in the clouds, and there's nothing we can do about it unless we get certain other things. But this sort of back and forth conversation that we're doing, I just feel like we're really not getting anywhere. And I would love for us to have some more concrete stuff before we spend another board meeting talking about the ifs and whats, and because I don't really know where we're going with this, you know, to be honest with you. Sorry.
Thank you. Selectman Brown?
Yeah, a question for Paul. If we took the approach of March 9th is the date, and then 24 hours beforehand we can cancel it, are we bound to reschedule it within a certain time? Or can we?
Yeah, 72 hours.
72. Thank you.
Thank you, Selectman Brown. We have Mr. Glowacki who's joined us. Bob, perhaps you could answer some of the technical questions that we've been bouncing around.
Sure. I mean, I think there's various types of microphones you can use. I would probably try, like, if we tried microphones at all, I would probably plan on using shotgun mics that are even further away. So you'd be standing, 6 feet away from the microphone, maybe even 12 feet. So you'd have, normally at a deliberative session, we only have 2 microphones. So we would do the same thing. There's an area at the podium or whatever for the board members to walk over to, whether it be outdoors or indoors. You could stand away from it. You wouldn't have to be speaking right into it. We'd have to experiment with the sound quality of that, but it'd be the same thing for the audience as well. And I know that the drive-in option was brought up once. That works whether you're in the car or out of your car for audio. I'm not sure how I'm not going to speak to the voting process of any of that, but the technical things, the sound worked pretty well and was able to go pretty far in the parking lot and people heard it. So you could feasibly maybe set up microphones in that scenario as well. One for the public to walk up to and one for the board. But I know also it was brought up at one point indoors, but separate rooms. That may be possible, but I'm not sure, with the usual, we get in there a day before to set up because it is the schools, they are using different rooms and stuff. I'm not sure if we would be able to set up, all of the, cables and everything to run, monitors and audio from one room to another. And we'd probably be simplifying our video coverage anyways to lower the amount of people in the room and everything else. So
Bob, because I completely agree with Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf. I mean, 2 microphones are not going to cut it. 2 microphones for the select board aren't going to cut it. So we're going to need, if we do it indoors, we're going to need multiple microphones. So I guess, and Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf, I think I understood what you were saying. What do we have, Bob? And what don't we have? What do we need? And can we get it? And can we do so between now and then?
Right now we have a lot of cleaning wipes, which we could use. Someone would be stationed there and they could wipe it down every single time. We also have Mr. Dean mentioned the sleeves. We did buy, it looks like a shower cap for the microphone, and you could change those every single time someone used it. We probably have, I would like to say, a couple hundred of those. I'm not exactly sure, but at the same time, that's not 100% protecting that microphone. So you could wipe it down every time. That's what we did at the few meetings early March when there were in the town hall. We just had someone wiping it down after each use, I think. But yeah, some people may be comfortable, some people won't be. So
I think it's fair to say whether we're inside or outdoors and you're sticking a microphone in somebody's car, that it's not 100% safe.
I won't speak to the safety of the microphones. I mean, definitely we have some stuff that can clean them in between use. Who would be doing that and how often it would be done? I guess that'd be up to the election volunteers and stuff like that. But we have the stuff right now that could clean it, and we have these little covers that you could change every so often. But I would, from a technical standpoint, while more microphones may be better for audio quality, and I don't know if that's what you guys were thinking of, or just trying to.
No, it was more safety.
Safety, yeah. I mean, with the two microphones, I wouldn't plan on anyone touching those microphones at any point, other than production staff. So it'd be like you'd be speaking into the air. So that would be we'd have to test that and see if that would work. But it would be two areas where you're speaking, I guess. But that's what we've been doing. Any in-person filming we've done in this whole pandemic has been outdoors with a shotgun microphone from 6 or more feet away. And we've also done that indoors, and it seemed to work just fine. So.
Okay, thank you. Selectwoman Cowan and then Selectwoman Gilman.
I also would love to bring back up the potential for doing this over Zoom. I think that we would maybe then have to spread it over 2 days, but I would be willing, and honestly, I'm willing to talk and hear everybody's ideas, because I think the more input and information we get, the closer we are to having a safe deliberative session and ultimately election where everybody is able to participate that wants to be. And while I totally hear and understand the frustration that goes into this, I also think we need to come up with the best solution. And my question again would go back to, can we have a Zoom deliberative session where we decide on what's on the ballot and then vote in person at a drive-through in our regular, the regular setup where it feels relatively safe and protected because people aren't in there for a long time speaking. And there's less opportunity for mask misuse to happen if we vote like we've been voting the past, how many? 2 elections, I guess. So that would be my other sort of offer. And I guess that's a Bob Gawacki question. That's a board question. It's a
Walter question too. I mean, legally, can we do that?
We've talked about this in both of the past 2 telephone conferences, Zoom conferences, and the problem with that is twofold. One, the legislature has now rushed in and given us its alternative, 1129, which doesn't make anyone happy, but it seems to preclude that possibility. And the second practical problem with it, as we've talked about before, is how do you verify that somebody at the other end of a Zoom call is in fact a registered voter?
But if we're not voting, does that,
You are voting. You're voting on amendments to the warrant articles. And if you're not a registered voter, you can't vote, and you can't even make an amendment to the warrant article. So that's an essential part, and I don't know how to I don't believe there's a mechanism to get over that particular hump.
Yeah, I know. I think it is incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
And I'm furious with the legislature, not the legislator on this call, through no fault of their own. But it's infuriating, and I feel like we're not able to best protect ourselves. I would not be in favor of sharing microphones. I also would not be in favor of letting people take their masks off to talk. You can speak at the microphone with your mask on. I can't wrap my head around how to do this safely.
Maybe, Mr. Chair, while you're contemplating this, a question just for the moderators that are with us. Paul, maybe you and Kate can confirm the kinds of things that Molly is talking about. Would they be able to be addressed by the moderators as part of the rules of the session? And maybe Walter could answer that too. Could the body vote to support some of the things that she's talking about? I realize there's some risk involved with that, but I'm curious as to whether that could be done if it were proposed.
Well, what I see in the election general provisions of 669:1 is the moderators of the towns involved, after consultation with respective town officials, which are you guys, shall communicate with each other to reach a consensus on the postponement. In such instances, one of the moderators shall be selected to document the communications and notify the Secretary of State. So I'm consulting, and as far as I'm concerned, Kate is consulting with all of you to tell us how we have to make this work. And I agree with everything everybody is saying. I'm not keen about how we're doing this. There's no way for Zoom to work, to keep microphones safe. The problem we have is we have to make some type of decision in the coming future. And you and I and Kate have to look at this, and Vicky, and say, what's the best of the worst that we can make this work? And whether you like it or not, we still have to do something to make it work. So you have to make a decision on how this is going to best be in the interest of the voter and the people working the polls. If you're leaving it up to me, that's not what I want to hear. I want to hear your opinion and how we should go about doing this. I don't want to be left as the person to make this decision, because you may not like the decision I'm going to make. So I'm looking for you to give me direction to help me make this work. And then I'll get in touch with the other town moderators to decide how we're best going to suit this. But like Kate stated earlier, we're voting with the school, and everything has got to match up, whether we want it in May, April, or March. We still have to do it that way. So you guys can postpone it another week or another 2 weeks. That's fine. But don't leave the decision up to me. I'm looking for you to give me some guidance on this.
Selectwoman Gilman and then Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first observation was going to be just that on the supervisors of the checklist, and how do we verify who's calling, who's watching, and who's making statements when we do a virtual meeting. That process has not been addressed by anybody at the state level. The other thing is, if, I think we have time. I understand Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf's concern that we're talking this to death, or just, we need to make a decision. But there are all these issues that we've heard tonight from different aspects. Everybody's got a different concern or additional concern. And we do have a little bit of time. And I think a little bit more research needs to be done if we're going to go outdoors. I don't know what the cost of that was for the state meeting at UNH. It's a question that the leadership has not answered. Because it would require a remote voting system, I don't know what that costs either. And we need to know that information, and maybe we can find it out from the state. And maybe that's the pressure that the different towns have to bring, although it sounds like the other towns want to do in person. So I think we still need a little bit of information, as the moderators have said. We need to know if the other towns are even considering a remote version, a virtual version of this. And then that bill is what it is, and it's very imperfect and very they didn't consider all of these things. And it was rushed because of the timing of what we have to do. So I would like to find out from our staff if they can delve a little bit into, the number of microphones we need. Do we need to add them? Do we need the shotguns, more long boom microphones? The voting system. I know it seems like sometimes we never vote on something. It's just listening. But we have to give everybody the opportunity, and the virtual system doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for the supervisors of the checklist, I don't think. And so there I am. We can keep talking because everybody's got a different view, and but we can decide when to end the conversation and move on to decide we're going to do it next week.
Thank you. Selectwoman Rountree-Olaf.
I don't know if it's been considered, and I also don't know how much at the high school we have access to, but if we're talking about large numbers, then why can't we take over classrooms and simulate what the high schoolers are doing and have small numbers in different rooms, have people go into different areas, open windows, 5 people per room, something along those lines if we're really concerned about numbers in one space. I mean, I'm just trying to think if we have to do it in person and we can do a combination of virtual and in person, then, I just feel like saying that we can't, we obviously have to do it. We obviously have to do it within a certain time frame, but I'm trying to make this so that we are not cutting off people who really do need to vote on this deliberative session. And I don't think we're going to have a great turnout, but I also think that, like I said earlier, we need to really come up with some concrete, here are some presented items that we think, ideas that might work, because I'm throwing out ideas and I'm seeing people say no, but I don't have the information that some of you all have. So, it's not helping that I'm saying, like, what if we try A? What if we try B? When there are so many different components of everyone out there who have different information for the puzzle, and we don't have all the pieces. So in order for us to make a concrete decision, we need to know exactly what is accessible to us, what we're allowed to do, what utilization we have of the high school, what legally is allowed, and have all of that information compiled in one location, one place, one conversation with a presentation, and then we have a conversation about it. But what we're doing right now is really feeling so disjointed that, 1 minute we're this and 1 minute we're that. It's just, I really feel like we're wasting our time right now. We've been talking about this for an hour, and I don't feel like we've gotten anywhere.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to point out real quick that we have been following our listserv. There are a lot of communities that are making this decision in real time as we are discussing it. So I don't think we're alone. I think it is complicated. I will say that there are various sizes of towns that have been communicating via the listserv. So if you talk about a town that's 1,000 people with a very limited attendance at deliberative session, they may not feel as put out by the idea of putting their deliberative session in a large gym, whereas Exeter is one of the largest SB2 towns. And so we're in a little bit different situation compared to some of the others. So, but my main point was just to say that a lot of the communities are making these decisions in real time. And to the Selectwoman's comment, I agree. There isn't really a direction that's been given to us by the state in order to do this, other than you've got to do it. And there are some very basic parameters.
Exactly. That's why I want us to have all of the parameters, have all of the information, rather than just talk in circles. So historically speaking, what's been the average number of people to show up at deliberative sessions?
It varies from point to point.
Last 5 years.
I would
in
say
the last couple of years, 200 to 225, and then by the time the end of the day, you're down to maybe 50.
Okay, so we've got 200, 225. The lowest number is 50, right? So why aren't we working with those numbers to make a decision about what we're doing? Because at some point a number was 2,500 was mentioned, and I have no idea what that was about.
I mentioned it as voting. That was voting.
All right, so let's work with actual information that we do have and make a logical decision based off of that. We're not going to have 600 people show up for the deliberative session in the middle of a pandemic. So it's going to be less than 200. Can we come up with something concrete based on the numbers that we have and not compare ourselves to towns that have, half as many or a quarter as many people, so that we can actually get somewhere and have something concrete with the option to cancel the night before, as Mr. Scafidi said, and then have plan B. I just feel like we need to just start, having some ideas down on paper, because people want to know what's going to happen.
So I think, and I agree with you, to your point, we've got two options, as Walter's explained over the last two meetings, and it's been in our packet, that we can either do deliberative session as we've done it before, or the HB 1129. I think the ideas that you brought up with the high school, every single one of them is good. And that's why I look to you, Walter, and even Paul. Can we do that as defined by the RSA for the deliberative session? I understand we can't do a virtual Zoom, that we need to be able to have the supervisor of the checklist verify and confirm, voting status. But once that's done, why do we have to be in the gym, or do we have to be in the gym? As Mr. Dean said, for smaller towns, it's not an issue. We're not a smaller town. And even though we're talking, let's say between 200 and 300 people, to be fair, we'll go on the high end. Can we have some in the auditorium? Can we have some in the gym? Maybe some in the cafeteria? Excellent point somebody made about the classrooms and opening the windows. These are all great ideas, but can we, before we even discuss that further, is that something we're bound to, or do we, let's just establish it now, do we all have to be in the same room?
If for a school district, the answer is no, because as I understand it, there is specific statutory authorization to do it. We touched on this in an earlier phone call, and I expressed the conservative point of view that I'd rather not take the risk, but I think we're going to have to push the envelope on something here. And I think if that option is available to us as a practical matter, then I'd rather push the envelope there than going more out on a limb with some other idea. So it comes back to a practical question of how many, extra rooms could be available to us in the school.
Selectman Brown.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up two. I just wanted to, give Paul what he asked for, a sentiment of the board, and it feels like the two important variables here are the political temperature right now and the COVID-19 variant. So when you add in the fact that Select Board is the public health body of the town, with public health oversight, we can't guarantee any kind of public health safety at face value. And then we don't have the authority to enforce masks. Combine that with somebody or some group of people trying to make a political statement at the deliberative session, and you have minor chaos on top of the fact that our initial duty, our public health responsibility. So I just nothing constructive here. Just a reminder that we are bound to. We have a public health responsibility to the town, and we're dealing with something newer than what we were dealing with 9 months ago on double fronts, on both the biological front and on the political front. So, how do we tell the chief to cover for, at voting, he did a great job with fully staffed, but are we prepared for something that is intended to be political in nature or protest in nature while we are trying to, there's a lot of assumptions happening here. And the core assumption is that we're just focusing on one crisis here, and it could potentially be two on that day. So, little gray cloud. That's all.
Thank you. We have several hands up. I'll go in the order in which they were raised. Vicky?
Thank you. Walter, just for clarity's sake, I thought in our last meeting that how the law was written about deliberative session, if we're in person, that we have to be under the same room, that we couldn't have multiple rooms. I thought that was something that we had touched upon in our previous meeting, that we couldn't have the gym and the auditorium because we weren't able to do a Zoom-like meeting. We couldn't do both.
You are correct that we touched on it. And at that time, my reservation about it is that there is no statutory authorization that applies to a town to do that. But that's not to say it would absolutely be found to be illegal, or if illegal, illegal enough to threaten the validity of a particular warrant article that was important to the town that had been approved. I think, and so what I was expressing back then was I prefer that you don't take that risk, but it looks like we're going to have to take a risk on something here. And I think the risk is less on that issue than some of the other ideas that we might be considering.
And thank you, Walter, for that clarity. I appreciate that. The only concern I have if we do the multiple rooms is how are we managing people coming in and out of those rooms and checking in with the supervisors of the checklist that they are actually registered. So we would have to be a barrier between wherever the rooms are, and then we would need to have someone managing the number of people in the rooms and that sort of thing, just on a logistical. So just wanted that clarity. So thank you, Walter. I agree with you. At some point, we do have to push the envelope and make a risk. But the other thing would be is if people in one room need to then do they have to then speak into the room? Do they have to then come into the main room where all the select board is to then make a motion or comment for public comment? We wouldn't be able to have multiple microphones set up in multiple rooms. I mean, it would be kind of like us having a town meeting exactly like we're doing here today. What is the difference?
May I hop in really quickly, Chairman, sure. Just to answer that? So if possible, and if we have volunteers within those rooms, this is where the tech piece comes in, where, I'm not the expert in that realm, but I'm hoping that we could figure out a way, that's where we minimize the touch points of people utilizing microphones, perhaps do similar where you check in alphabetically speaking. So, based on the alphabet within our town, you segment in certain rooms by numbers, and then the volunteer would be in charge of having the, folks who are raising their hands if they have questions, and that would be fed into everyone else's space on the camera via Zoom kind of process. But there would be a live person to monitor that. So this is where I'm talking about legality is, I don't know whether these are options because I have this is all new territory, right? So I'm trying to think of what's the best options available for the worst case scenario that we're dealing with. And obviously doing complete Zoom doesn't seem to be an option based on the conversations we're having. Doing the car aspect also doesn't seem to quite be where we want to or can be. So, within the building, I'm trying to figure out what's the safest method where we can allow the most number of people distanced with those who want to be unmasked, those who want to be masked, where we as select board members, volunteers, supervisor of the checklist can all feel safe ish within the realms of getting this done. It's not going to be perfect, but if people have better ideas on how we can do it, that's what I feel like the conversation needs to be, and not, the far ends of the spectrum.
But it sounds like the lines you're thinking along would have people participating from those rooms and not going in and out of different rooms.
Yes.
And
because
so that
go ahead.
That becomes a practical question, both technologically and for the supervisors of the checklist.
Right. And
as to whether that can be done.
Right. And that's the conversation that I'm looking to have. Like, what I'm hoping for tonight is that we come up with, okay, here are the two scenarios that are realistic for what we have available to us. Can we actually do either of those things? If not, then we need to really figure out what's the next option. So if it's feasible for us to have the in-person meeting within 5 rooms, 6 rooms, whatever the case may be, at the high school, then that's when we turn to the next department and say, can you guys make that happen? If so, what do you need and how much is that going to cost?
Well, coincidentally, the tech expert was the next one with his hand raised. So,
yeah, I just wanted to mention, because to raise to your awareness, I think the town of Stratham last year held their town meeting indoors and outdoors. So it was not under the same roof. I think they conducted their, the board or the people running the meeting were into the gymnasium, and there were 2 tents erected outside of the building with video feeds running to them. And I think one of our former employees actually did all of the audio and video for that. So what I believe the setup was they had, a video monitor so they could see the main room, I guess, if you will. And then there was probably a microphone and a camera in each of the rooms. So it wasn't using Zoom, but you could do the same thing through Zoom. So, if it was at the high school, the auditorium and the gym, if the 2 gyms were separated, each gym could have something. I can say we probably don't have the stuff to do that right now, and we'd probably have to hire some people to do that. Both audio and, on the video side of things, especially because it's not in our building. If it was in the town hall and town office, it'd be much, much easier, but those are not as big of spaces. So technically it's possible. If we have the funds to do something like that, I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, you could set up people in different rooms, and the people in each room would be able to see the other rooms and everything like that. It could be done.
To Bob's point, just real quick, Stratham did do that. They had 2 big tents, and people went into the main room to give their input at the town meeting. I will say that Stratham also had, I think, about a 4-month lead time to build up to what they were planning to do as well. So,
yeah, and in the high school, I believe there's some setup a little bit that maybe would, if we were able to use school equipment, maybe it could work. Because I know they usually have, when there's an indoor graduation, they have, overflow seating and stuff in the auditorium so they can see people in the gym and whatnot. But yeah, we'd have to get started working on that as soon as possible if we were going to be doing something like that.
Thank you, Bob. Mr. Scafidi?
Yeah, I was just going to say what Bob said. I've got to believe that the Exeter High School has a PA system that goes into every room and has a video feed into every room that we should be able to tap onto. I can't believe in this day and age that a school that's not that old has not gone ahead and wired the place for at least sound everywhere in every room. How else can you notify the students in each of the classrooms or the gymnasium or wherever that something's going on or they have to leave or whatever? And there's probably a closed circuit television feed somewhere in a lot of the rooms, if maybe not all of the rooms, that we can just feed out of. And if we can't get a mic system that works, then one of the bad parts will be that if you want to make a motion, you'll have to come to the main auditorium, get in line, make a motion, and then go back to the room where you came from. Or if there's room in the auditorium, you can find a seat that's socially distanced. So there's got to be something that this town doesn't have to go out and spend a lot of capital on getting a PA system set up for the high school. You know, there's a PA system that we should be able to tap onto to get into every classroom. So I think that'll solve that problem. And same thing with the video circuit as well.
Bob, quickly, we have some hands up, but do you know the answer to that question offhand?
I know the gym and the auditorium can be set up so that there could be cameras in both of those places that are controlled by one thing, which maybe could be displayed in the auditorium. There's a sound system in both the auditorium and the gym that feed into those camera systems. I would assume, what Paul's speaking to is, the actual PA system for the school, which is in the main office. You could use that and it would go to all of the things. And maybe there's a way the phones in the each classrooms, but I would caution against using classrooms because I think 2 locations would be far complicated enough in itself, not going to, multiple rooms, and especially if you had to walk to the main space from a classroom, by the time you got there, it'd be the past or something. Yeah,
well, the gym's across the hallway and the cafeteria is down the hallway. So you could have 3 relatively large rooms that should be able to take up whatever we need.
And the tech system is pretty advanced at the high school. I know that they had a budget that spent quite a bit of money on the sound system, and it's probably one of the most advanced in the entire town. So just having looked at the SAU budget, because I looked at it, it should have the capability to do what we're proposing. And so what I'm looking for is if Walter says that's a possibility, then, Bob perhaps can go forward and work with Paul to make sure that we can at least get the process started in a conversation for that.
Selectwoman Cowan.
I'm not giving up on my Zoom idea. And I would ask that we can figure this out based on having people drive to the high school like they would have to, check in with the supervisors of the checklist who can all be outside and be verified that they are voters in the town, and then get a Zoom link and go home and get on a Zoom call. And then we are letting people in that we've verified are voting members and can participate legally in this meeting. The other thing that I would then say is we could have somebody, a supervisor of the checklist, somebody who works on the staff, a volunteer who does that, who's there all day, who can check late voters in to make sure that we are not allowing in people who cannot legally participate. If that is still not acceptable, I would then say that we should move forward with the assumption that we can use the cafeteria, the auditorium, and the gym at the high school with a setup for people who are outside, who are not comfortable being inside. And I would also say that we should have the supervisors of the checklist in a protected area that is outside that can be covered in case there's weather. Those would be my motions, with the preference for the Zoom, because I do not want to be in a location, like Daryl said, with a lot of people when there are potentially multiple risk factors going on.
Can I just jump in, Mr. Chairman? Mm-hmm. I just got off the phone with Rusty Lister. I don't know if it was Selectwoman Roundtree or Olaf brought up about the ventilation, or maybe it was Selectman Brown. I just asked him about the ventilation system. He said it is state-of-the-art, top of the line. They now have Murphy 13 filters, ionization filters, and 2 other filter systems that they just spent a ton of money on. And he said he would put it up against any ventilation system in the area, that it's relatively new within the last year or 2, and they can't get any better than what they did. So
That's in the auditorium or in the whole?
That's in the whole building.
Great. That was Pastor Heidi who asked that question. So that's excellent that we got that answer.
Yeah,
and that makes me feel better about my second motion.
He said that filtering system, ventilation system, is unbelievably strong.
Thank you, Paul. Attorney Miller.
Hi. I guess I was just trying to sort of come back to the things that we're more certain about. As Walter's saying, part of what we're trying to do is to not have a legal challenge that could invalidate the entire process. So we're trying to thread our way between the health risks, the very imperfect sort of legal options that we have. And that really makes it difficult. There is the virtual option, which nobody really loves, but 1129 is essentially the no contact virtual option. The voters are not able to participate in amending and debating or discussing, but it is essentially what our legislature has offered us at this point. I don't know of any towns that are considering it because it is so imperfect, but that's what we've got. The desire to do it in another virtual way, such as the Zoom approach, that one I think is a whole lot more risky, just in terms of, is there going to be a challenge and might it be successful? So trying to balance, our job with making the voting happen in a legal and safe way, it's tough. I can tell you that it's likely the co-op school board will also do an in-person session. Obviously, it will be at the school. So we need to work together on all these technical questions. I think having several locations, I'm not sure how many. If we have 1,000-person auditorium and we have 200 people in there, that's a fifth, of the capacity there. That's a pretty good dilution. Everyone wearing masks can cut transmission down a lot. It is not perfect. My thinking right now, which is just preliminary, is I would want to have a separate room, not a section of the auditorium, but a separate room for people who cannot or will not wear a mask. And my concern about allowing that versus barring people is I think it creates an issue. If we tell people they absolutely may not participate unless they're wearing a mask. When we did the balloting, it was less time in the room. You're correct, Vicki, because people were voting and then leaving, but some people took kind of a long time to get through those lines. We diffused that situation because we had an alternative, and people who came in sort of looking to challenge the authority to have any kind of mask control had, just all the air came out of their tires. So I think we have to, in addition to the safety pieces and the practical sort of logistical pieces, I think looking to do this in a way that's going to sustain and not be successfully challenged is also part of our job. It's sort of a three-part challenge.
Thank you. Selectman Brown.
I just wanted to sort of raise a scenario where you have the high school take 25 rooms, say 10 people in a room, and you can have closed circuits so people can see each other, but the real point is people hearing each other, I assume. And then it's Zoom, so you're in person to pass through the checklist, and then you're using your own phone for sound, so you're not people can stay in place. Is that a possibility, or where does that fall off?
Bob, do you have a quick answer to that?
Unless you're gonna hire like a whole company to run the whole show, I would say no, because even just deliberative sessions, like we definitely get a lot of great cooperation from the audio guy who is now retired from the school who set up their audio system. and now Tim, who is running the channel over there. But, it's always a little bumpy, like with, the integrating town stuff with the school equipment and whatnot. So to do that, just like 25-fold in the rooms, we'd be completely relying on the school. So they would have to do it for us. And
I guess I maybe misunderstood. People on their phones, if they'd rather not use a communal mic, they can call into the Zoom link and basically use their phone as the mic.
I guess I just don't, I'm not thinking that people would have good service in the school with my own experience. And Wi-Fi would not be made available to the general public at the school. So that wouldn't be an option probably.
Paul? All right, I just got off the phone with Mr. Lister again. And Mr. Lister with Tim Crimmins has set up a system where the auditorium can be fed into the gymnasium. And it can go two ways. It can go closed circuit or it can go Zoom. And you can watch it via Zoom in the gymnasium on big screens. They will set it up. They haven't quite set it up yet, but they did this specifically for the SAU meeting, Kate, just to let you know. That Rusty went out and talked with Mr. Crimmin. So yes, we'll be able to feed both the gymnasium and the auditorium. However, if you want to communicate with the auditorium, you would have to leave the gym and go to the microphone at the auditorium to do interaction on a specific warrant article or whatever, but you will be able to have a Zoom meeting at the gymnasium and be allowed to feed off of the auditorium. So that, I think, eliminates can we, how we, will we. We got two-way Zoom or closed circuit TV if that's what they still use in today's day and age. But that's what Rusty said that Mr. Crimmin has set up specifically for the SAU meeting.
Rusty available to call in for 5 minutes?
Rusty?
Yeah.
I can call him back and ask him. He'll probably hate me.
Is that select chairman? Is that okay? So if we can, because I just hate for us to be going back and forth. Yeah. If he could just hop on for 10 minutes so that we can get some questions out. And
if Mr. Lister's willing to join us, I think that would be a great idea. And then while we wait for him, what I was going to suggest is that unless a member of the board wants to make a motion tonight, Mr. Dean, if you and Bob and whoever else you delegate within the town can get a hold of all school personnel that would be assisting us and get a picture of the scenario or scenarios and what they're going to look like so that we can come in to our next meeting and see what it's going to look like and then be able to make our decision. Paul, you've already gotten a bunch of questions answered. I'm sure Mr. Lister can answer the others tonight, but I think the board would be most comfortable if we can actually see what it is that we're looking at.
Okay, I'm on the phone with Rusty, Mr. Lister right now. Let me talk to him and I'll get back to you.
Okay.
Thank you. And in that as well, thinking about cost, will there be extra costs? Do we need to have, hire Rusty on for the day to assist us? I don't know if typically the high school has their staff working the deliberative session. I don't know, what else we're looking at in addition to what we normally would do. So if we can see that kind of information and have it so we have an idea of what we're working with.
If Mr. Dean and Mr. Glowacki can get a whole projection as to what expenses would be, and then also, Mr. Dean, to the best of your ability, if you can find out whether any of this would be reimbursable under any of the COVID relief.
Yeah, we can look at all those things. I think one of the issues that we're going to have for sure is, how many rooms are actually available at the school and what days and times are available. And there are a lot of logistics that go with this, obviously. So we'll have to find that out too. I do think what's been said is consistent with what the superintendent has said so far, is that the SAU is looking for 2 large scale venues, the auditorium and the gym, to use for their session. So I was not surprised to hear that technically is becoming a reality.
While we wait for Paul, well, the other thing, Mr. Dean, is I'd like some sort of picture or an idea or ideas of how we can protect staff, particularly the supervisors of the checklist. Vicki brings up a great point. The way we typically have them at deliberative session, people are coming at all angles. That shield is not going to protect them. So if we could have some options as to what would be the safest for them, that would be prudent as well. Paul?
Mr. Lister is on the road. He won't be home for about 15 minutes. I think he literally just got out of work. And I do have you'll have to send him a welcome to this Zoom meeting.
Okay.
And I got it if you want it. Mr. Glowacki.
Bob, are you there?
Yeah, I can send him an email.
Do you have it? Do you have his email?
Yep.
All right. He'll be home in about 15. If you want to wait till next week or whenever, that's up to you guys. If you don't want to hang around for another 15
does the board, well, I have two ways we could go with this. If the board has specific questions for Mr. Lister that they'd like to ask this evening before our next meeting, then we can certainly have him come on in 15 minutes. In the meantime, if the board would indulge me, we could skip over the landfill solar array discussion because that is going to be a lengthy discussion. And we could go to the budget. I don't think that will take more than 10 or 15 minutes. So it's whatever the board's wishes are.
I say we go to the budget and then we come back to
Mr. Lister. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Any objections from the board? And I apologize to the participants and the attendees that are here to talk about the alternative energy initiative, but we need to get this squared away and also give that discussion the time that it deserves. So we will skip over and go to the FY21 budget. Where we left off last week, we were talking about the IT position.
And Mr. Chair, I'm going to step away for 15 minutes and I'll check back in.
Thank you, Attorney Mitchell. Mr. Dean, I believe you presented a memo to the board with the updated figures. If you could go over those quickly, and this is inclusive of the IT position we discussed last week, if the board were inclined to make a motion.
Right, and with the position included in the job description and the dollars are in the packet as well for reference tonight. So you have the general fund increase at 1.46%. Over FY20, the water fund is a 14.1% increase, and that includes $500,000 in capital. And then the sewer fund is a decrease of $671,000 or 8.73% under FY20. Then we do have the default numbers there as well, the latest versions of the default. One change I do have to make, Mr. Chairman, I'll mention two things actually. One is that I went through the Budget Recommendations Committee minutes again today, and actually the BRC did recommend a $50,000 warrant article for the Conservation Fund. So we'll be adding that to the warrant, without objection from the board, obviously. And I can report to you that the police and the town reached a contract just today, and tomorrow I would ask 10 minutes of the board's time to go through that with you. Tomorrow is the deadline for collective bargaining.
And is that meeting posted?
Yes, it is.
Okay, for what time?
7 o'clock.
Okay.
And it is for Zoom, and like I said, it should not take long with the board.
Okay, and just a reminder to the board, it's customary, correct, Mr. Dean, to have that meeting for you to give us that update?
That's correct, it is.
Okay.
It is the last day or the deadline, so to speak, for collective bargaining.
Okay. And on the warrant article for the Concom 50,000, correct me if I'm right, that's a reduction from last year?
That is I believe the $50,000, and I'll just confirm it, but the $50,000 was part of the 2020 budget as well. They had asked for an increased amount, but through the process, it was reduced back to 50.
Okay, because my recollection is they came in They came in at 50. Didn't the planning board actually recommended 100? Was that correct?
I believe the planning board recommended a higher amount, yeah.
And the BRC went back down to the 50. Understood. Okay.
Right.
Are there any further comments or discussion about the IT position? I know we have Mr. Swanson here as well as Mr. Glowacki. If the board were inclined, I would entertain a motion to add this money into that line item. Mr. Dean, I believe that line item is in our packet.
Yes, and I know the finance director is online too. It should be the full-time wage line in the IT budget. And take a moment here.
I have it here, but the prints.
Yeah, it is. The account is 014-15025.
Could you repeat that a little slower, please?
014-15025.
Okay. And the total increase?
The total increase for that line is, just have to refer to the packet for a moment here. It would be 44,618. That's in wages. And then there are various benefits that go along with that as well. So I don't know if you want the whole number and just add the wages and benefits to the bottom line. We could do that.
That's what I was inclined to go with, the bottom line line item, and then just adding the total.
Yeah, so it's 72,987 would be the add.
And that's for 8 months?
8 months, right? Wages and benefits.
Do we have a 12 for FY22? Do we have a 12-month amount for full year?
12-month amount is 82,909 for the general fund.
And that's the whole package?
110,546, but the split is general fund 82,909, water fund 13,818, and sewer fund 13,818.
Okay, so we need to make 3 motions then for the 3 line items?
For the 3 budgets, correct.
All right, so what's the line item for the 72987?
2987.
I hear Doreen, so that's good news.
Good.
Oh, yes, I'm here.
Doreen?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
I said hi.
Did you want the full change amount at the bottom line, or do you want me to discuss each of the lines that changed?
I think if we can just go from the operating budget, the general fund, the water fund, and the sewer fund, those 3 bottom line items and the amounts.
Okay, so.
That might be the easiest way to make the motion.
Yeah, the new IT budget with the 8 months of the network administrator would be 291,463.
That's the line item, okay?
Yep.
And the amount on that is the 72,987?
Just bear with me one moment. Okay, actually, I don't, oh, you know what, because of the allocations, the line would change by 36,602, because other pieces are allocated to water and sewer.
So the line item for the general fund is 36,602?
Yes.
Okay, and the amount?
Oh, no, that was the amount of the change.
I'm sorry, okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay, and then could we get the line items for the water and sewer funds respectively in the amounts?
Yes. Bear with me one moment. And the water and sewer, once I give them to me, they're going to be identical.
Mm-hmm. Russ, would you also prefer, before we do that, a motion to adopt the job description, or just putting it in the line items is sufficient enough? You're muted. Russ, can you repeat that unmuted?
Apologize, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it was good. Sorry. I'm just looking at my the sheet that was created for this, so my apologies.
So the question I asked was, do you want a motion to adopt the job title first, or just is it sufficient to put in the 3 line items?
It is sufficient to put in the 3 line items because it's subject to funding, so.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm having issues with my screen. It's so small compared to at work. Okay, so 8525 is going to be the addition to the water administration and the sewer administration for that position.
Okay. And do we have those 2 line items?
Yes. The full number is 409,340 for water administration. And I'll look at sewer admin. The sewer administration number is 463,039.
Thank you. So just to confirm, the general fund is $36,602. And then the water and sewer respectively each are $8,825?
8525.
8525, yep.
Yep.
That was me not reading my writing. Thank you. Okay, so I would entertain a motion if the board were inclined to add to the general fund under line item 291463, the amount of $36,602, and to the line item of the water fund 409340 for the amount of $8,525, and then also the amount of $8,525 to the sewer fund line item 463039 for the sole purpose of funding an additional IT position.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Rountree.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Before we move on from the budget, do any of the board members have any other questions, revisions, amendments to the budget? Okay, seeing none, I'll then remind the public that the Exeter Select Board has given notice of the public hearing pursuant to RSA 33:8-A for the notice of public hearing for the 2021 bonds, as well as the Town of Exeter 2021 operating budget. The meeting will be held via Zoom on Tuesday, January 19th at 7 p.m. Okay. And I don't see Mr. Lister yet. Mr. Dean, do we want to go into COVID-19 updates quickly?
We can, Mr. Chairman. The only update I had for you was the fact that we are in the midst, as we mentioned last week at the select board meeting, of updating the website on COVID-19. So people that go to the website will find more recent information regarding vaccine information and so forth. So we are working at updating that.
Thank you. Good evening, Chief Wilking.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Board. Long night for you all tonight. Huh?
Yes, how are you?
We'll keep it brief. It's only been a week since our last meeting. Things are the same today as they were a week ago. As we all hear the news, the coronavirus isn't slowing down. The numbers in Exeter have kind of leveled off, which is, I guess, good news. As we leave the holiday season, we've all heard of a spike, and there were only 38 new residents in Exeter tested positive. So I look at that as a positive sign that perhaps we're leveling off as we enter the doldrums of winter. The second Exeter Fire employee that tested positive has returned to work today. So both have recovered well, as well as to be expected, and they're been cleared to work. On the guidance side, we received some updates today. Due to the vaccine being available to healthcare and first responders, the state has changed the necessity to quarantine if you've had the vaccine and 14 days after your second dose, to be no longer the necessity to quarantine upon exposure. So that's good news for the nursing staff, for healthcare, and certainly for the first responders, fire and police. Because we are exposed periodically. We've been having employees for the last 11, 12 months under quarantine. So this should minimize that as we move forward. 25 of 28 of our members have received the first dose, and most will be in line for the second dose, either the last week of January or the first week of February. And I know there's been a lot of talk on who's in line for the vaccine next. And as the state continues to push along their phase 1 and phase 2. We're wrapping up phase 1A this week and next week. The state is hopeful we get to the vast majority of healthcare and first responders so we can feel comfortable moving on to what they call 1B. Those people over 75, medically vulnerable and at significant risk, staff and residents of other facilities other than long-term care that may be transitional housing and things like that, and correctional officers and staff. That's the next group of individuals. I know the town manager and Pam and all, we've been working hard at getting information for the website. So as people check the website, they can get more. And I'll leave it open to Russ to work on, the kind of off of that is his COVID update rather than me. Go down the line is I jumped in late in the day today. I was up this morning, so I wasn't part of all of the website discussion. But the vaccine distribution at the high school is going smoothly. I was out there again last week, and we chatted with the staff, the National Guard. They are pleased with the response. It's a steady flow, but there don't seem to be a lot of backups, and they are typically closed on Sundays and Mondays. So we start back up tomorrow, first thing 8 o'clock, with another whole round of vaccinations. So again, I can't speak highly enough of them. They're out there in the cold in a parking lot doing a great job doing this, doing the vaccination process. So I'll pause there and let Russ or James jump in and beyond if you have any questions.
Great. Thank you for the update, Chief. Mr. Murray?
So I don't have too much to add to that. Chief pretty much explained everything that I've been in on as well. The phase 1B vaccinations are expected to start at the end of the month. From what I understand, individuals will need to go through their PCPs to at least set that up. They're still working on guidance as to how they're going to set up the vaccination rosters, but I learned today that 25% of the vaccinations that are going to be allocated will be allocated to the state. The other 75% will be going to CVS, Walgreens, PCPs, and kind of the more private entities. So at this time, there's no guidance as to how to get a vaccination for those in phase 1B, those over the age of 75. Just hang tight. Hopefully, I was told guidance might be coming this week with the governor's address on Thursday. Anyone with any questions about the vaccine, about testing, 211 New Hampshire has its own If you select option 1, its own COVID-specific line, that addresses, and you can select different options for guidance for isolation and quarantine, guidance for vaccinations, and information on testing as well. So that's a great resource I'd recommend people look into. I've been getting a lot of calls about individuals that really want a vaccine. Unfortunately, I don't have any, and I don't have a whole lot of information to offer either. So at this time, we're all kind of waiting for more to come out. There is a lot of, I think a lot of people are getting a little exhausted of COVID, clearly, and I think we all feel the same way. The vaccine is the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's tough to hang on for a few more months, but we're doing really well, and we just got to hold on a little longer. Hopefully we get some good guidance soon. That's all I have this week.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Murray. Russ, I know we have Ms. Perry and Mr. Bisson, and I think Hope's here from the library. Are any of them here for COVID updates?
I know Mr. Bisson can give you some updates as to recreation, and I'm sure Hope could about the library as well.
Okay. Hi, Greg.
Good morning. Good evening, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Sorry about that. Yes, thank you for having me on. Just want to give an update on what Parks and Rec is actually working on. We are working on quite a few things. We hope to have some details come out shortly. I know everyone is going to be disappointed. Of course, we can't get together for the annual Sweethearts Dance. We are going to come up with something drive-through. Details will be coming out. So it's going to be a drive-through event where they'll come outdoors to get a picture, and then other details to follow what they get for their little family outing. So that's one thing we're working on. We are going to work on, but we've paused all classes, of course, but we're also going to be working on doing some hiking programs with the Conservation Commission. We're also going to be working on alternatives to Easter egg hunt. I know everyone is thinking April and Easter. We know most likely it won't be much different than last year. So we're going to figure out an exciting way to do Easter egg hunt, and fingers crossed, spring, it can't come quick enough where we can get back outside and do more activities outside, such as t-ball and soccer like we did in the fall, and flag football and track and field, all under protocols of COVID-19, so we can keep safe. And that's about it. We're busy, and we're planning summer camp and how to open the pool safely as well. So we're really actually pretty busy at Parks and Rec. So if you have any suggestions, if anyone has suggestions for programs that they might be interested, if it's a virtual program, we are looking for virtual instructors as well. So we're open to anything, and hopefully everyone can get a little bit of recreation, get out there. The weather's been beautiful, and we want people to continue to go outside.
Great. Thank you, Greg. We appreciate your efforts and your creativity. And, you and the department have been working very hard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Hope. You're muted. There you go. Nope. Hope.
Hope, can you turn the volume up on your computer?
Make sure you don't have headphones plugged in.
And her microphone may not be on. Bob, any suggestions for Hope?
Nope. You could check the next to your mute button. There's a little up arrow, and you could do your test speaker and microphone and see if it's working. If it's not, you could try switching to phone audio and just follow the instructions there. But I'm guessing your microphone isn't working.
I will add in the interlude, Mr. Chairman, too, that one of our public safety employees is due back tomorrow after testing positive. So we're glad to have that employee back with us.
Fantastic. Thank you. While we wait for Hope, Director Perry, did you have any COVID specific updates or?
Yes, thank you. I would like to just mention that the Commissioner of New Hampshire DOT has been working with Homeland Security and DHHS to develop a program to track public works employees statewide and municipally wide across the state as far as any outage goes according to COVID or any other reasons. And so, and I notified Chief Wilking that we have gotten access to log in to the web EOC, and twice a week we're going to be updating that information so that the state can get a sense of how many people are being affected as far as public works. Because as you can imagine, if we do go out and in the middle of winter, if we can't be clearing roadways, there's going to be a real issue. But we're also tracking it for all public works employees, not just highway response, but the entire department. And I think part of that effort is to recognize that public works employees are first responders. They have been legally recognized as that since 2001. But we still have a lot of challenges being, brought to the same level as police and fire. And we recognize that. But I wanted to just recognize that the commissioner really deserves a lot of credit for bringing this level of awareness to the issue.
Great. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Hi, Hope.
Okay. I went to my phone. There's something wrong with my computer. I just wanted to say that we did reopen the library on Monday today. And we found out that it is possible that the person that we thought had a positive COVID test was actually a negative. It was misdiagnosed. But we found that out halfway through last week, so we decided to stay out the rest of the week to be sure.
Okay, good. Thank you.
We were very busy today. Of course, the renovation is ongoing. It's a little choppy right now as to where people can go, but it's moving forward, and we hope to have the children's room almost completely finished by the end of this month. That would include all the stacks. Of course, we can't have the kids in the way we did in the past, but we're working on different types of programming that include smaller groups that meet more, meetings more often of smaller groups. That's what I'm trying to say. But we're looking into that. And we have been using social media a lot, especially to keep teens engaged. And if you are on Instagram, you'll see that there's a lot going on for the teens and tweens on Instagram.
Terrific. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Dean, I see we've also lost Mr. Scafidi. I mean, we have a lot of folks that are waiting to talk about the solar arrays. I don't know.
Should we just...
How much longer do we want to... Just looking at the time.
It's getting late. I think we should just move on to the landfill solar array discussion, and then we can come up with questions to send over that perhaps can be answered.
Mr. Dean, I didn't hear what you were saying.
I'm sorry. I do see Mr. Scafidi on the list.
Yeah. Well, it's been well over 15 minutes, and I appreciate Mr. Lister volunteering to come on, but for the sake of the time and for the sake of our attendees they're here for the next discussion item, I'd like, if the board has any specific questions for Mr. Lister, perhaps we can get them to you, Mr. Dean, and you can get them to Mr. Lister. And in the meantime, I'd like to go back to my suggestion about getting a picture for the board so that next week when we meet, we don't have an hour next time. I mean, we've got our budget hearing. So, but if we have something that we can look at with the options, we can move forward. And then if Mr. Glowacki can get us the answers on the technological piece.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I'll follow up with Timothy Kremen, who runs the school channel. We're already been talking about it, so I'll have something to Russ to report to you guys. So.
Mr. Lister just joined, so if anybody has any quick questions while he's here, he made the effort to come on.
Would it be possible?
Mr. Lister.
Good evening.
Hi, Mr. Lister. I just wanted to know if it'd be possible if we just threw out the scenario, Mr. Scafidi, would you just throw out the scenario that we had discussed with having, let's say, the 3 rooms, the auditorium, the cafeteria, and the gymnasium? And if we were to have people in those specific areas, what the sound and video accessibility would be and what that would look like for folks? Because I think Mr. Scafidi said that we wouldn't be able to have people ask questions within those particular rooms. They would have to go back to the auditorium. Is that correct?
Okay, we haven't really run the full gamut of tests, but you take a wireless microphone. We have a very enhanced wireless microphone system in the auditorium. And so we ran a kind of a dry run just with audio, and we were able to, with a wireless mic, go anywhere in the gym without any dropout. So we thought that was a good option. We could have a mic in there. We could feed the audio, the video into the gym. And if that was permissible, that they could speak from the gym to the meeting going on in the auditorium, then we feel we could pull that off. There was a little bit of some questions as far as on the school side, whether they would allow that, or maybe anybody who had to speak to an article or to any discussion, they would have to be in the auditorium. I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but we believe we can pull that off, that we could keep them right in the gym.
And just one other question. Mr. Glowacki, I don't know if you guys, I don't know how many microphones the high school has and whether or not the microphones that we as the town have are compatible with their equipment. They're not, of course not. That would be too easy. So how many microphones does the high school have that we would have access to?
As Bob knows, how you doing, Bob? Good to see you. In the Morissette room, I believe we have 12 or 14 channels. If we had to move those, I'm sure we could, but there's lots of individual channels with individual microphones there. In the auditorium, I'd have to check with Steve and find out. Go ahead, Bob, if you know.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I think the limited place would be your gym. In the auditorium and in the Morissette room, you have definitely over 10 microphones. They're like similar to the ones we use, but the way they all work is they're different frequencies and stuff. And I'm sure, they wouldn't mix with what we have and things like that. So there's maybe some possible ways we could feed them in, but I think you guys have plenty of microphones.
So we wouldn't have feedback issues with having the multiple microphones in the different areas then? Okay.
Probably not. I would not think so.
There's also what I might add is on the I don't know too much about them because I've never used them. When the plays use microphones, I think they have microphones on the stage from this above. So I don't know if that's an option for the auditorium.
Or lapel mics, you mean, or?
No, I think they actually have and Rusty, maybe I'm incorrect, but I think you have some microphones hanging from the ceiling. I'm not sure if those are always set up or if those are temporary.
Yeah, Bob, go ahead, right. Bob, you could use multiple shotgun microphones and get this job done as well.
And Bob is absolutely correct. There are several mics hanging. So if there's for chorus and band, I can find out the exact number. But I believe we could, do you have an idea how many you're looking for? Because we could maneuver some things around and get it tied in.
I would assume at least 6 or 7 for the stage based on the number of select board members, and then the external mics for participants speaking to ask questions. So
okay, I'm sure we can do that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This has been super helpful just to have this information right now.
Hey, Rusty, give him an idea about the vent system, would you please?
Oh, the ventilation? Sure. So what we've been doing pretty much all this year is we've enhanced what was already a very good ventilation system, but we've upgraded the filtering from MERV 8s to MERV 13, which is a much denser filter. And then we've added ionization units inside the ductwork. So that is one more level of filtering. After that, the air exchange rate is very, very good, which is, of course, everybody's concern. And I've got a superior HVAC tech with 20 years plus in the business. And certainly I defer to his expertise, but he's excellent. And he has assured me that he has all the confidence in the world that that room is producing very safe air, and filtering, and the exchange rate is very good.
Thank you, Mr. Lister. Selectwoman Cowan.
Thank you so much for hopping on at such short notice, and for the information that you're providing. My question is, in addition, I'm wondering if it is possible to incorporate some sort of outdoor space to be used for people who do not want to be in any of the rooms. I understand that they won't be able to participate by speaking, but if people want to be outside and opt for that option where they can potentially vote outside, although they won't be able to speak to amendments without going inside. I'm just wondering if there's capability for that, to have the sound projected outside, with the understanding that it wouldn't be two-way.
I'm sure it can be done. One thing I can offer is, if your meeting is, as you probably know, we have a vaccination site going on out in the sophomore lot by the stadium. So we have set up an extended access point for Wi-Fi there. If your meeting was after that, they could certainly park there, and we could figure out some way. I know Bob did an excellent job with the movies, projecting that over the summer. So with the Wi-Fi signal there, that might be helpful to some. I know it totally blankets that sophomore lot, which is the lot adjacent to the stadium. Bob, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you could stream, if the meeting was being streamed, it could be streamed there. It would definitely be delayed. So by potentially more than a minute or so. So again, technically definitely, but practically speaking, you want to talk, you get over there, and that happened, 10 minutes ago or something. I'm not sure how great that would be. There's, not to get too technical, there's a bunch of, things you could do it relatively live, but that would involve like a lot of, advanced setup where, we have that at the town hall and town offices in a small capacity, but it would be too much, I think, for this, one day event to set something like that up off site. I'm trying to think of a way where people can participate without having to be inside with, mask misuse, and they can still participate in the vote, even if there's no way to reasonably or cost effectively provide them an opportunity to make amendments from not participating in the debate. Technically speaking, you can definitely run, audio and video cables out there so they could be watching and listening. We'd have to get the stuff to do that. Okay, and so I guess for the next meeting, can I hear an estimate, or can the board hear an estimate about how much that would cost and what exactly we would need in terms of lead time or preparation to have an outside capability for, again, not speaking and not making amendments, but to hear and be able to participate in the voting, and then to enter into the auditorium if they wanted to potentially make amendments? I can try and, talk with Rusty and Tim and see what we can do. I think a lot of the stuff that I would rely on is actually IT related. And that's where we do run into a lot of issues over at the school, just because we have our system, they have theirs, and they don't talk. So, I can come up with a couple different options. Usually what we do at deliberative session, we bring our entire system We didn't do it last year, but usually we bring our entire system over and like we operate as ourselves within the school. If we're using the school stuff, we need school staff there running it.
Okay. This is really helpful. Thank you.
Great. All right. So Russ and Bob, you've got your assignment. We'll bring this up again next Tuesday quickly, and then we can look at what our options are, but look at, specifically what we're dealing with.
Yeah, we'll take everything, Mr. Chairman, that you said into consideration tonight. There's a lot of details here, and we'll filter them through tomorrow.
Okay. Terrific.
Probably get you some initial reaction.
Okay. Mr. Lister, thank you so much for coming on this evening at short notice. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Rusty.
Anytime, Paul. Take care.
Paul, go ahead, Paul.
I was just going to say, I guess that we're done for the night, I hope. I would like everybody to realize that you're not going to get everything you want out of this. I think it's going to be a near impossibility. So you're going to have to wrap your heads around getting something that's as close as we can get to make it work. And to try to make it push and shove, you just may not be able to do it. So realize there's going to be some give and take. If we're going to meet next week to get this done, we're not going to get everything we think we're going to get, we would like to get and want to get. So be able to do a little compromising and make this all work so everybody's safe as possible, and yet we get our work done. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Vicky. Attorney Miller, Attorney Mitchell, thank you again.
Good night.
Good night.
Walter, I'll be in touch.
Okay, Paul.
Bye, Vicky. Thanks. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Sharples.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
We're going to go back to a continuation of yet another discussion from last week, the solar array development at Crossroad Landfill. An exciting initiative of alternative energy that was presented to the board. The reason we're back this week is the select board, after seeing the presentation, hearing the presentation, and asking multiple questions, really wanted to reach out to the Sustainability Committee, the Energy Committee, the Communications Committee, and also just get this initiative out to the public. So what we've got tonight, I know we've got some attendees that have been very patient, waiting to speak. We've heard from citizens. We have letters in our packet, but we also have the respective chairs of the Sustainability Committee and the Energy Committee, each of whom I believe has a statement to give to the board, relaying their committee's thoughts on this. So I see Sustainability Advisory Committee Chair Chetna Palmer. Good evening. And you're just muted.
Hello.
Hello.
Everyone. Hi, Nico.
Good evening.
Good evening. So did you want me to go ahead and make the
Please,
statement?
Yeah.
Okay. So just wanted to clarify in terms of the Sustainable Advisory Committee, Dave, we had a meeting last week, and we had a brief discussion about the solar array project. And I have a very small statement to read, so I'll just go ahead and read it. And then I can email it over to go attach it to the minutes, if that's okay.
Yep, you can email it to Mr. Dean.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right. So this is a Sustainability Advisory Committee comment to the solar array proposal for the town of Exeter. So in 2017, the town of Exeter made a commitment to the Paris Agreement on a municipal level. The proclamation was to support the principles of the Paris Agreement was adopted at the June 2017 Select Board meeting. So the Sustainability Committee is in support of the town of Exeter's plans to pursue the solar array project on the closed landfill at the transfer station Crossroad in Exeter. It is coming up to 4 years since the proclamation was made, so if the town is looking to offset its carbon emissions in line with the Paris Agreement of 30% reduction by 2030, then the solar array project would meet this target. This is provided the solar array generates enough renewable energy to offset the municipality's non-renewable energy consumption. The energy reduction goal is achieved whether the project goes ahead as direct ownership or the leasing of the land. The town should report on a regular basis its greenhouse gas emissions and take the benefits of the reductions through this initiative. It should be noted that under the direct ownership model, the town would benefit from additional revenue generated through the sale of the renewable energy credits. The committee feels that it is crucial that the town is able to demonstrate that it is generating and using energy that is carbon-free. For Exeter as a town to become 100% renewable and be regarded truly sustainable, the residents of Exeter should also be guided and assisted in moving away from fossil fuels, as the impact of climate crisis is being witnessed on a daily basis, not only locally, but throughout the world. So in principle, the Sustainability Committee is in support of the solar array project, but it also depends, I think, on the financial side of things, which I think we'll be discussing as well. So again, it's open to the discussions and further exploration of the project.
Great, thank you very much. Renee Allen is the chair of the Energy Committee. Good evening, Renee.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And we've got some good news for you here, so you saved the best for last, all right? It's been a tough night for you guys out there. All right, so my name is Renee. I'm chair of the Energy Committee. I'm going to give a tight presentation here. I'm going to do some introduction. Lou Hitzrow is going to follow up with some comments on the assumptions. He was on the interview panel that chose the solar company that we're going with. And then Dave Sharples, the town planner, is going to talk a little bit about the details of the municipal bonds. We also do have Ned in the audience, I see, from Revision to answer technical questions. And I also do see Warren Biggins down there, and he's the sustainability manager at the Academy, where they own their own solar array on top of the field house. Okay, so here we go. All right. Okay, the Exeter Energy Committee strongly endorses a plan to place a 1.77 megawatt solar array on the Crossroad landfill. This project meets two important goals. Clean energy. It would provide approximately 2 million kilowatt hours annually of clean, renewable energy to the town, significantly reducing the town's dependence on non-renewable energy sources. And number two, this provides some income. How much depends on which option we choose. Shall we lease it or shall we own it outright? Either way, the system itself costs $3.62 million. Now, I'm a visual person, so I made this chart for you. Let me do a screen share here. Okay, so let me run through this with you here. So the system itself costs $3.62 million, whether we lease it or we own it. On the lease option, it's a 25-year buyout and there is no tax impact. Actually, there's no tax impact on either option. We have up to 4 or 5-year extensions on the lease option, and it's cash positive in the first year. So we're working with the 25-year line there. So the lease option would be 473,249 off 20 years, and the owning option is 4 times that at $1.7 million. So the owning option would be a town bond issue, and this would be a 20-year at $275. That is the quote. However, the actual loans are coming in somewhere at 1.67. So I'd like to reiterate again that there's no tax impact on this, and it only saves us money and eases the tax burden for the citizens. So I'm going to turn it over to Lou here. Let me stop my share.
Thank you, Renee. Good evening, Lou.
Unmute me.
Right there. You got it.
There we go. Okay. Thank you. And I appreciate your time and listening to our presentation. Speaking for the Energy Committee, I'd like to say that we do recognize that the cash flow estimate provided by revision for the direct ownership path depends upon a good number of assumptions. For instance, they predict a 2.5% annual increase in the kilowatt hour cost for energy. Energy that's going to be provided by the utility Unitil. They also predict a 2% escalator for annual operation and maintenance costs. So it's entirely possible that the 25-year cash flow figure could be less than the $1.787 million amount that revision is predicting. However, we've been assured by revision that their assumptions are conservative and that they're based on analysis of years of national trends. And as they say, it's to their advantage for their customers to be pleasantly surprised that the outcomes of a revision project outperform their predictions. So it's entirely possible that that $1.787 million figure could well be an underestimate. In fact, revision assumed a bond rate of 2.75%, as I think Renee said, and that's what they used in their calculations. If the current rates are significantly lower, that alone could have a large positive effect on the annual cash flow. The Exeter Energy Committee believes that either path, the lease agreement or direct ownership of the array, will benefit the town. However, we wish to go on record as preferring the direct ownership path because of the substantial cash flow advantage. So thank you, and interested to hear your deliberations.
Great. Thank you, Lou. Mr. Sharples, I believe, put out a press release last week, and you also notified all of the abutters, not only of your press release, but also of this meeting. So I'd like it to be noted that abutters of the property have been invited or notified of this meeting. So with that, I'll open it up to the public. And so far we have one hand up, Lindsay, two hands, but Lindsay Sonnet, you're first.
Hi, Lindsay Sonnet, 1 Salem Street. Speaking as a member of the Communications Committee, I just wanted to quickly address a suggestion that was raised last week, I believe by Russ. And to that, I'd say that working with the Energy Committee and perhaps Sustainability to craft some educational language to help town residents understand what they'd be voting on would be right up our alley. As a committee, we've done that in years past where we've summarized all warrant articles to make them sort of easier to understand for town residents to know what they're voting on. So this would be directly aligned with what we've done previously. So I can't speak for the entire committee because we haven't met recently, but conveniently we do meet tomorrow morning. So we'll discuss it further then and figure out how it can be helpful in this process.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lindsay. And, if you could let us know what we can do to help get the message out. I know you Communications Committee did a wonderful job last year with the warrant articles. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Great. Next, we have Mr. Dan Jones. If you could just state your name and your address for the record. Mr. Jones, I think you're muted.
Testing, are we now on?
Hi, good evening, sir.
Good evening. Daniel Jones, 181 Kingston Road. As trustee, I'm the abutter to the westerly side of this proposal. Next to the dump for too many years. Excuse me, I call it the dump, not the landfill. The proposal looks great. Concerns I had originally were about the cap on the dump. It appears that the proposal, which I've reviewed, that the array will be sitting on, let's call it, feet and not penetrating the cap. Concerned about whether any of the cabling, any of the wiring is going to have to be underground, which would penetrate the cap of the dump. is what supposedly keeps rainwater from infiltrating through whatever's underneath it, going down into the river. That's a concern of mine. The other question I had is I reviewed, not as thoroughly as I wish I could have had time, the financial end of it. I'm wondering if the ownership proposal includes payments on the bond. It includes interest. Does it include the principal as well? That wasn't clear to me. Except for that, it looks like a great idea. I did walk our line this afternoon. Town seems to be taking good care of it. I was concerned about the town reserving access to repairs necessary, the very steep slope to the westerly side of the dump, which on occasion on our property. Thank you very much. As I say, it's a great proposal. I'm very much in favor of it.
Mr. Jones, thank you. Mr. Dean, could you quickly answer his question on the interest, and then maybe Dave or Jennifer could answer his first question?
Right. The bond payment does include interest, principal and interest.
Principal.
And we have Ned Reynolds. He is one of the attendees. So if Exeter TV could, he could chime in or possibly make him a panelist. But it is my understanding from the proposal and the question that we asked the same question that there is no underground wiring. It is all above ground. So there will be there cannot be any penetration of the cap. But Ned can.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mr. Reynolds, could you speak to that, please?
I'm happy to. Are you hearing me?
Yes. Good evening, sir.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you again for the opportunity to participate here. And Mr. Sharples is correct. We have a lot of experience in building these kinds of arrays on closed landfills, and in any event, these kinds of projects are done on closed landfills only in accordance with all the regulations that pertain to those landfills that, of course, are administered by the New Hampshire DES. So there is not allowed to be any disturbance to the closed landfill. No digging into the cap, no burying of any cabling, or certainly no piles driven.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next attendee with a hand up is listed as Sheila. Good evening. If you could state your name and your address for the record, please.
Hi.
Good evening.
Hi, my name is Sheila Mullen. I live at Four Cross Road, and I want to thank Dave Sharples for sending out that informational letter to let us abutters know that something was happening over there. I did not have a chance to look at the proposal. I didn't know that things had been presented last week to the select board, but I am in 100% favor of having solar panels put over across the street. I just had one question, and that was, what is the lifetime of a solar panel?
That sounds like one for me. 40 years. The array is expected to last 40 years or more. The inverters, which are the boxes that convert the electricity from DC to AC, have to be replaced at 20 years. That cost is included in all of the projections that we've presented, but the system itself is expected to last 40 years or more.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Next, we have Warren Biggins. Warren, if you could just state your address for the record, please.
Hi, folks. I actually do not live in Exeter, but I am the sustainability manager at Phillips Exeter Academy, and I also serve on the Exeter River Committee.
Warren, excuse me one second. Does the board object to Mr. Biggins speaking, as he's not an Exeter resident? No objection, sir. Please continue.
Thank you. I'm here to just voice my strong support for this initiative. I was really, really excited to read the proposals that came in. I do think that the direct ownership model is the way to go. And I can tell you that PEA has had a solar array that was installed by Revision atop the Thompson Fieldhouse in operation for almost 3 years exactly now. And our experience with Revision has been very positive. We found them to be very responsive to any equipment issues that have arisen. And the annual kilowatt hours that they predicted would be generated by the array has proven to be very accurate. One thing that I heard a little bit earlier pertained to the town's greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets, which, again, very excited to hear that the town has done a greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Very excited to hear that we've committed to the 2-degree pathway that was outlined by the IPCC. One thing that I did want to touch in on here is a little bit of a technical matter, but the direct ownership model, as Revision has outlined, calls for the town to sell the renewable energy certificates, or RECs, that are generated by the solar array. The reason that Revision is calling for that is to make this a more financially attractive model. That's great. That gets the renewable energy built. That's probably the most important thing, in my opinion. But we should be very clear that if the town sells the RECs that are generated, the town is not able to claim the associated greenhouse gas emissions reductions. I can explain that a little bit if you have questions, but as we generate the renewable electricity, if we sell the associated RECs, the town is not able to take those emissions reductions. So if the town wants to sell the RECs, you cannot count that towards the emissions reduction targets that the town has set. If you hold on to the RECs, and this is what PEA does, we hold on to those RECs and we retire them by claiming that we're using the green energy, the green power, you are able to use that towards your greenhouse gas reductions targets. That is all for me at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Biggins. Dave, I think you wanted to comment to that.
Sure. Yes. I mean, the interview panel, the Energy Committee and I were aware of that. The way we figured when we talked about it meeting at 2030 is, being a town project and the need to pay off the bond, we're going to at least take advantage of selling the RECs until 2030 to pay down the bond because that commitment. And then once we decide we want to keep the RECs, and we didn't have any, as you'll notice, we didn't have any sale of the RECs past year 15. So that's kind of how we worked it. And then that would be ours after that, and we could use that to offset. So we kind of did both. We understand exactly what Warren's saying. We understood that, but we wanted to put forward a proposal that, sold the RECs to pay off the bond, to make the town whole, and then reap the benefits after that.
Thank you. Okay, we have another attendee with their hand up. If we could let them in. Good evening. If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Hello, yes, this is Terry Cole.
And Travis Sawyer.
We are at 10 Cross Road, so we're direct abutters to this. So we did have some questions and comments about this proposal.
And concerns.
And I did look through the proposal online, and there was a lot of unanswered questions I had around a lot of the visuals around this. So I understand that they're ground mounted units, but there was no comments as to how tall these would be, if there's any fencing required, if there's going to be any change to the gradient of the landfill, visual questions like that. I was wondering if there were any answers to any of that at this point.
Mr. Reynolds.
Sure. I showed in last week's presentation, I showed some pictures of ground mounted, as these would be ballasted solar arrays. for example, at the South Portland and the Portland, Maine landfills. I would say that the bottom edge of the panels are anywhere from 4 to 5 feet off the ground, and the panels are mounted at about a 40-degree angle. So the top edge of the panels are probably 9 to 10 feet above the ground. That's as high as anything gets. There certainly is no change to the gradient of the landfill. Per the previous question and answer, there's no change in no changes are allowed to the contour of the landfill. Fencing, we expect that, yes, the array would need to be, well, I guess it would be your choice if certainly under the direct ownership. If you're the owner, that you might want a fence to surround the entire array. But, if an investor owns it, then the investor probably will want, the array to be surrounded by a fence. Again, working with constraints associated with the landfill. But if you're the owner, you can probably choose to have, the perimeter of the array fenced or not.
Okay, thank you for that answer.
So we also still have some other concerns too. And of course, property value is number one. Being directly across from the transfer station, will any of the current berms be raised to hide this array from the neighborhood? Things like that. Also, what kind of lighting is proposed for this? We're very concerned about the light pollution during night.
If you want me to take the first stab at that answer, there's certainly no lighting required for a solar array to operate ever. And as to whether there might be any berming, I think that would be up to the town. If people consider looking at a solar array to be an eyesore, I guess the town could consider various ways to mitigate that. I guess I'm biased. I don't think solar arrays are ugly, but if they're, I guess it would be up to the town to consider various options to mitigate any visual impact, whether that be planting a hedge or building a berm or, putting up a fence with a solid fence. I think that would be the town's role.
Okay, and that is fair. So I just asked the select board to keep that in mind for the residents that are abutters to that.
Yeah. We do also have some questions about the electrical required, being that this will require phase 3 power. If this does come down Crossroad, what kind of construction will that entail? Will these phase 3 lines be suspended from the current telephone poles, or will they be buried? What kind of impact would that have with driveways? And also, if the residents of Crossroad would like to have 3-phase power, would that be available to them, or is this only going to be available to the transfer station?
Well, there are two. It appears from our initial examination that there are two possible routes. I assume you're referring, of course, to what was in the proposal about the 2 ways to get 3-phase power to the site. We would evaluate both for practicality, cost, and preference of the town. Because one route is mostly across town property, out to Kingston Road. But I guess if the crossroad option were selected, 3-phase power is very common throughout town. You see it on Kingston Road. It just amounts to where you have the three wires in parallel across the T-tops of telephone poles or utility poles. And so I'm sure that that's what would be done down Cross Road, that the utility, would install the upgrade. I don't know. I can't speak to now whether it required new poles or whether they could simply enhance the existing poles, put a new cross-top that would accommodate the three wires. I'm sure that I know that burying underground is much more expensive, so I'm sure it wouldn't be that. As to your question about whether three-phase power would be available to residents, I don't think that's really something that residents need. Three-phase power is sort of another way to think of it as high-strength power. Usually, you always have three-phase power to large facilities, like schools and commercial buildings, factories, but residences operate very adequately, with service coming from single-phase power. So, but if for some reason, if three-phase power comes down Cross Road, then if there ended up being a business down there that needed three-phase power, then it would be available. It would be present, and I assume it could be connected into.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you for your questions and your comments. Dave, one question I had for you, based on one of their questions, did you in the interviewing committee talk about, how the physical appearance surrounding the solar array?
I don't think we didn't get into that with the panel. I did and walked the site a couple of times and try to look at it from the residents that surround it and what the visibility is. But just a couple of times cursory. I think that's if we move forward, then we kind of go and really look at it to see, how it affects folks. One thing I do know, when you enter Crossroad, I'd have to figure out where these residents are, but when you enter Crossroad, the landfill cap goes up, and then it kind of slopes away off the backside. So I couldn't, there's no real vantage point that I could get. You could see it all. It already had it fell away because of topography. But I would have to go back out there and do that due diligence, and I'm sure we could do that and work through. I mean, that's what we do at planning board, level and so forth, through screening, and I'm sure we'd be able to, to figure something out and what impact it would have and possible ways to mitigate it if it does have an impact.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mullen has her hand up again.
I have an additional question now regarding the wiring, and so would that mean that higher tension wires would be coming down Cross Road?
I can take that.
Go ahead, Dave.
There's two options. Solar panels have to tie into what's called three-phase power. And if you're familiar with that, you can go right out to Kingston Road or right at the end of Cross Road. It already comes down Cross Road, 1 or 2 telephone poles. And basically what it is just 3 wires. You'll see them. It's 1, 2, 3. 3 wires usually on top of everything else that go. So that's what it would be. But we haven't figured out if the due diligence would find out that route up Cross Road or over directly to Kingston Road through the property up by the old Simpson barn and tie into Kingston Road there. So there is a possibility there would be, 3-phase power along Crossroads. That is one option and possibility.
But if I could also chime in, Dave, I don't think it would be accurate to characterize them as high tension wires. When people use that term, you're usually envisioning sort of these large, even higher, much higher towers, not just poles. Nothing like that would be coming down Crossroad. It would simply be, as Dave said, the same kind of utility poles you see throughout town, the same electrical service that you see on Kingston Road, extended down Crossroad.
That's why I gave the example. You should go out and see it. You'll see it right on Kingston Road. There's 3-phase power on top of those poles.
When will that decision, how will that decision be made?
I would think it's going to be evaluated on a number of factors. Cost being one of them, feasibility. I don't know if the utility company would weigh in on where it would like to see the connection. Probably. And I'm willing to hear from abutters and yourself, Sheila, as well, to kind of weigh into that whole discussion.
Well, you will, Dave.
Okay. You know how to get in touch with me, so
I do.
I'm going to talk to you and try to work something out and explain the whole process as we go along. But we're just not to that point yet.
Okay.
Just trying to figure out if we're going to move forward or not at this point, I believe.
Okay. Thank you.
Sheila, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the attendees before we bring it back to the board? And I'll pause for a moment for hands to go up. Mr. Jones? You're muted, Dan.
Am I on now?
Yes, you are.
Excuse me. What is the time frame for the decision making for the entire project? Is this something that can require a town meeting vote? If so,
yep.
Is it going to be this coming year? It's going to be a year from now?
That's what we're going to discuss when we bring it back to the board tonight, Mr. Jones. The answer to your question is either option would require a warrant article. It would go to town meeting for the voters to vote. And the board needs to deliberate now whether or not the intention is to put it on this year's warrant or not.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the public? Mr. Reynolds?
Yes. If I could, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to reinforce and perhaps elaborate a little bit on what Warren from the Academy said about the renewable energy certificates and selling the renewable energy certificates, that revenue stream. He's absolutely correct, and I'm really appreciative. I'm really glad that he brought it up and explained it so clearly. The corollary to that very important point is that the leasing option, which we've called, path one, where the town does not own the array, but rather leases the land, and a developer, an investor, provides the capital. Revision Energy still builds the array, but investor owns the array, puts up the capital and owns it. In that case, the investor, the owner of the array, owns the RECs. And the investor is going to sell the RECs for the revenue stream to recoup his investment. So if the town were to select that option, the town will never have claim to the RECs and will not be able to really be able to claim any greenness, will not be able to claim carbon reduction from the array. So path two, direct ownership, is the only path under which the town would ever have claim to the recs. And as Dave explained very well, I believe that the town, the plan of the town would be to sell the recs as long as it takes to pay off the bond. And after that, the town could then choose not to sell the recs and then thus claim the carbon reductions.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, bringing it back to the board, Selectwoman Gilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to first speak to Ms. Mullins' question about the high power lines and recommend, as Mr. Sharples did, to take a look at what's on Kingston Road already, but also if you're familiar with the power lines that go across Kimball Road, further down, that's not what we're going to have here, just to be clear. One of the other things that nobody's mentioned is about the ownership is that we would be paying for a maintenance fee. That's included in the cost. And in that way, the town doesn't have to have specialized personnel to maintain that or mow the grass or whatever, or maybe mow the grass, but that if there's some malfunction, we don't have to have somebody with that technical experience. It will be taken care of in the cost of the contract.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Mr. Reynolds, if not, I have one. If the generated electricity is sold, how do you project the energy market over the lifetime of the contract?
Well, I guess we have projected as what you see in the proposal that the market price that the town would receive for the electricity being sold, we expect, which is say the utility rate. I'll use a somewhat technical term, the default utility rate. That's the basic charge for energy that all of us pay to Unitil for our power. And it's the same rate that they will pay you or the investor for the electricity from the array. So that default utility rate is we show in the projections in the proposal now stands at 7.7 cents per kilowatt hour. And we expect it to, consistent with 30 years of utility price history, we expect it to increase at an average annual rate of 2.5%. Okay. So that's one of the key assumptions of the, of the figures we've provided. And if you'd like, Mr. Chairman, I can share a graph that I showed last time, that grid electricity price history, just so.
No, we have it, and we have it in our packet.
You've got it there. Okay.
Yep. Thank you. Selectwoman Gilman.
Yeah, my question actually is for Mr. Dean. When would we take out this bond?
So the way we've set it up is you could take up the potential bond next week at a hearing if you wanted to do that. And then the suggestion I was going to make later on was, obviously from the board's perspective, you've got a no action item if you want, you've got a bond for ownership, or you've got a lease type of arrangement. I do want to add a fourth thing to the mix, just because I think we should do this, which is one of the towns also did this via license through its select board, but I don't want to throw that at you. I just want you to understand that that's out there as a mechanism. Some places have done that. But anyway, whatever the choice is to be made, we can draft an article as needed. So, but the short answer is you can take that up next week. The lease would require a 50% +1 approval, and the bond would require 60%. And that's one of the differences, obviously. But I think that the proposals are markedly different enough that they're different than the warrant articles. So but it's a 10% differential there.
Yeah, my concern is how long can we anticipate the interest rate being that low? And so if we go forward with this, sooner the better. And it would be locked in, correct?
Right. The bond bank's next sale is July of 2021. So if this were to be approved, that's what we would do. We would go out to market in July or for July.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mr. Dean, to that end, do we need to move tonight to post this as a bond hearing?
We've already taken that and put it up and posted it and advertised it just in the event that the board was going to make that determination next week. So we sort of front loaded that for you. So you're all set either way. Okay.
We do have Mr. Jones has his hand up, and I know these folks waited patiently for 3 hours. So, Mr. Jones, I'm going to take it back to the attendees so that you can ask your question or make your comment.
Very quickly, I reviewed the proposal this afternoon. I didn't study it as I've retired. Does the lease option include any figure for tax payments or payments in lieu of taxes by the lessor to the town if they are be a private investor using town property?
Yes, I can answer that. It does include a pilot, and it's in one of the line items on page 13.
Thank you.
Page 13. I'm sorry. On page 11.
Thank you. That's my only question.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jones. So, Mr. Dean, no further action from the board this evening, and we can take this up next Tuesday night at the bond hearing.
You can, and I think what we would do is we would craft an article to reflect either situation. And then when you're done your hearing, depending upon the decision you make, that's how we would finalize the warrant. So again, if you chose to put an article on the warrant, we would give you both versions of what is needed, and then you could vote depending upon which one you decided upon.
Okay. Terrific. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the board? Okay. Lou, Chetna, Renee, thank you very much for your work on your respective committees and attending us and giving us your statements tonight. Okay, we will move to regular business. Madam Clerk, you have a couple of things to move here. Once you unmute yourself. Nope.
Okay, now?
Yes, it's late.
What page am I looking for?
You are on 172 of 194.
Okay. I've been scrolling all over the place, so okay, 172. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Mr. Chair, I move to approve a land use change tax for map 103 lot 4 in the amount of $31,500.
Motion a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
And clerk says aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye, the motion passes unanimously.
Okay, next I have a tax abatement. I move to approve an abatement for map 70 lot 98 in the amount of $803.27.
Second.
Motion a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
And the clerk says aye. Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Madam Clerk. We do not have any permits and approvals this evening. Mr. Dean, Town Manager's report.
I really don't have a report tonight, Mr. Chairman, unless you have questions of me.
Any questions for Mr. Dean? Nope. Okay. Select Board Committee reports. Select Woman Roundtree Olaf.
I'll have to update you next week. There was a meeting on Friday for the Housing Committee. I had to get the notes. I missed it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Selectman Brown.
All my committees meet this week. Tomorrow is communications and police stakeholders, and then facilities committee Thursday.
Busy week. Select Woman Gilman.
Well, you heard my Energy Committee meeting minutes from Ms. Allen, but we are meeting again next week to do our usual, or not a special meeting. And also the Start District Commission is meeting, I believe, on Thursday. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Selectwoman Cowan.
Nothing to report. I just have the police, the Exeter Police Commission meeting tomorrow. Daryl, I'm hoping that you can be on at least from 5 o'clock on, or from 4 o'clock on. I have a work commitment starting at 4. And then I have planning board Thursday.
Okay, terrific. Sustainability Committee met last Tuesday, and the bulk of it was going over the solar array. So for the sake of time, that's all I can report to you there. Correspondence, Mr. Dean, we had one piece of correspondence from Scott Marsh, the DRA sales ratio survey. Did you have anything to add or comment to?
No, just would, if the board is interested, if you review it and you have questions, let us know. This is regulatory in nature and filed with the DRA to meet our assessment requirements, which they have done.
Great, thank you. Okay, reviewing board calendar. We're going to meet tomorrow night at 7 very briefly. As Mr. Dean alluded to earlier, I don't envision that would take more than 10 or 15 minutes. Mr. Dean, we'll get Zoom invites?
Yes, I'll make sure of that.
Okay. The public budget hearing is scheduled for Tuesday the 19th at 7 p.m. And then after that, looking at the 25th, I think that's going to all depend on where we stand with the deliberative session. So more to come on that. Obviously, if we have to meet again, we have to meet. But if we can get that squared away and there's no other business, then certainly, Mr. Dean, February 1st? Second, whatever that.
January for deliberative session, or the next board meeting after that?
No, for the next regular board meeting.
February 1st, yes.
Okay. But we should keep the 25th on our calendars in pencil in the event that we need to keep deliberating over the deliberative session. We don't have any non-public sessions, so are there any other comments from board members? And if not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
The clerk says aye. Mr. Chair.
Aye, the motion's unanimous. We stand adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, all.